Welcome. This is an Alt-Shift-X livestream. Let's talk about House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 6, entitled Small Folk. We are not going to spoil future episodes. We're going to chat about the episode, compare it to the books, put it in context, speculate, talk about the relationships and the mysteries, and we're going to have fun. We're doing these live streams every week at about 10 p.m. Eastern Time, right after Hot D airs. I will answer some of your questions. You can use the Streamlabs link at the top of the video description if you'd like to ask some questions. I will answer most of your questions and donations towards the end of the live stream. But let's chat about the episode. This was a bit of a globe-trotting episode. We went to the Westerlands and saw Jason Lannister with Lord Lefford. We were in the Riverlands at Harrenhal. We heard about the death of Lord Grover Tully and his replacement with a new Muppet. Oscar Tully is now the Lord Paramount of the Riverlands, ruling over the Brackens and Blackwoods and Freys. So that might give Daemon an opportunity to salvage his attempt to rally the Riverlands. We were in the Vale with Rhaena Targaryen and Jane Arryn. We heard some intriguing news of a dragon in the Vale running about burning sheep. We were also in the Crownlands in King's Landing and Driftmark and Dragonstone, where Adam he claimed a dragon. He claimed the dragon Seasmoke, formerly the dragon of Laenor. Or perhaps Seasmoke claimed Adam. He was running away from the dragon, and the dragon seemed to have claimed him. And so at the end of the episode, Rhaenyra goes off to confront this new dragon rider. Rhaenyra confronting the new dragon rider of her ex-husband Laenor. Adam is apparently the half-brother of Laenor, because Adam is apparently the bastard son of Corlys. So that's intriguing. But of course, before Rhaenyra flew off, she made out with Mysaria. So that was exciting and interesting development for Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra continued to be frustrated with being disrespected as a female ruler. She slapped Lord Bartimus Celtigar for all of his irritating backtalk, and she held a sword, trying to grapple with these notions of male power roles versus female power roles. And then, she made out with Mysaria and got on a dragon, so Rhaenyra is taking action. We also got more intriguing, mysterious, mystical stuff from the witch Alice Rivers at Harrenhal, which was fun. Aemond Targaryen in King's Landing fired his mother, Alicent, removed her from the small council, so Alicent has no political influence anymore, it seems. Aemond is really consolidating his power. Aemond was intimidating his brother Aegon, intimidating him, trying to get him to not tell anyone that it was Aemond who burned Aegon, betrayed his brother. And also, Aemond decided to get his grandfather Otto Hightower to come back to King's Landing to be the Hand of the King again, although no one seems to know where Otto is. Meanwhile, there is war in the Reach. So the Reach is this region ruled by the Tyrells. The Hightowers of Oldtown are also in the Reach. And we hear that the Beesburys are rebelling against the Tyrells and the Hightowers, or the Hightowers at least, because the Beesburys are mad about the death of Lord Lyman Beesbury, who was murdered by Criston last season. This is Lord Lyman Beesbury. So his family are fighting against the Hightowers because they're mad about Lyman's death. It's quite funny, in the books, the Beesburys think that Lyman is still alive at this point, because the Greens keep insisting that, no, Lyman's fine, guys. Lyman is okay. He's in our dungeons because he disagreed with us, but he's A-okay, when in actual fact Lyman had been dead the entire time. So, the Beesburys are steamed, and so the Reach is becoming a war zone, which is a problem for the Greens, because the Reach and the Tyrell armies and the Hightower armies, they need to get them to King's Landing if they're going to participate in this war. So lots of geopolitical events going on, as well as the personal and romantic and family relationships that are going on. So let's talk about it. We'll go through each scene and talk about what's going on. We'll answer some of your questions. It's going to be a fun time. So let's get into it. Phantom, thanks for the donation, says, was the lesbian relationship at the end of the episode canon in the books? The books do not mention Rhaenyra making out with Mysaria. No, that is not mentioned. I mean, it's interesting, like, in season 1, there was this close friendship between young Rhaenyra and young Alicent. And the actors and the showrunners, in interviews and stuff, talked about there being a sort of a subtle romantic undertone to Rhaenyra and Alicent's friendship when they were younger. And so I think there is some, like, precedent to the idea of Rhaenyra maybe being attracted to women as well as men. But no, that's not something that's in the books. It's also interesting, this dragon that is in the Vale. So Rhaena saw a bunch of burned sheep in the Vale, and Lady Jane Arryn was talking about, oh yeah, there's a dragon out there. He's a big wild dragon who seems to have come here looking for food. So this is also not in the books, and it looks like they might be making a pretty significant change to the books. Because, like, obviously, the fact that there's a dragon in the Vale, and Rhaena Targaryen, through her entire arc, has been frustrated that she doesn't have a dragon, and she wants a dragon. Obviously, a possibility is that Rhaena might try to claim this dragon that is in the Vale. And that would be a very big change from the books, if that is what happens. In fact, George R.R. Martin, the author of the Game of Thrones books, wrote a blog post last week, quite a pointed blog post, in which George was saying that in my canon, in my books, the dragons of Dragonstone would never go to other kingdoms looking for food. A dragon wouldn't go to the Westerlands or the Riverlands or the Vale, and if you ignore canon, then the story falls apart. So it does seem as though George Martin might be unhappy with this particular change, with this dragon being in the Vale. So, yeah, this is potentially a large change from the books, but we shall see how it goes. Thanks for the donation from Joseph, who says, with the mention of the Triarchy, do we know what the politics of Essos are at this time? Any big events that happened? So, yeah, the Triarchy is an alliance of eastern cities. So specifically Tyrosh and Lys and Myr. So these cities are just to the east of Westeros over here. And so these guys got together and they got a fleet together and they took over the Stepstones and they were attacking Westerosi ships. So that's why in season 1, Daemon and Corlys and the Velaryons got together and fought against that guy, the Crab Feeder, and Daemon killed the Crab Feeder. And so for a little while, that was the end of the Triarchy. That was the Crab Feeder here. So for a while, the Triarchy were defeated, but then in, like, episode 6 and so on, the Triarchy resurged, and so then, and they were also in alliance with Dorne. Dorne, the southernmost kingdom, joined in with the Triarchy for a while, which could be important. And so then Corlys went back to war against the Triarchy, and Corlys almost died, and ultimately in season 1, Corlys succeeded in defeating the Triarchy. But the Triarchy still exists over in Tyrosh, Myr, and Lys. This alliance of the three daughters still exists. And so that's why Aemond in this episode says, hey, Tywin Lannister, I want you to go and make an alliance with the Triarchy because we can get the Triarchy to attack the Velaryon blockade that is blocking the Gullet over here and preventing King's Landing from getting enough food to feed their people. I mean, personally, I think Aegon's idea of just burning Corlys's ships with Vhagar would probably be effective as well, but Aemond tries to get the Triarchy involved. And also, you know, politically, there was also mention of the Red Kraken, Dalton Greyjoy. So remember the Greyjoys of the Iron Islands. We saw Theon and Yara and Euron Greyjoy in the Game of Thrones show. They are the Greyjoys. They're the pirates, the Vikings. So there's this talk of Dalton Greyjoy, who is the current Lord of the Iron Islands. And Jasper Wilde suggests that Alicent could offer to marry Dalton Greyjoy to form an alliance between the Ironborn and the Greens. And then hopefully they can use the Greyjoy Ironborn fleet in order to attack Rhaenyra and break the Velaryon blockade. But Jasper says that, you know, Dalton seems to be waiting for a better offer, and Alicent is not keen to marry Dalton Greyjoy, because Dalton is a notorious loose cannon. Dalton Greyjoy is 16 years old. I mean, at least in the books, Dalton is 16 years old, and he is notoriously violent. He loves raiding and raping. He's a pretty monstrous, dangerous guy. Not super trustworthy, so it makes sense that Alicent and the Greens are reluctant to work with him, although they kind of need a fleet to deal with the Velaryons. So those are some of the geopolitical issues going on. Brittany, thanks for the donation, asks, were the food boats in the book? Yeah, so in this episode, Mysaria seems to have come up with this plan of donating a bunch of food to the common people in King's Landing, and they put this red dragon banner on the boats, because the red dragon banner is used by Rhaenyra, that's her side, the Blacks, whereas Aegon and the Greens use a golden dragon banner, because Aegon has a golden dragon, and that's a way of telling each other's heraldry apart. It would be very confusing in battle if the two opposing sides had the same heraldry, right? So, yeah, Mysaria and Rhaenyra donate all this food to King's Landing as a way of saying, hey, common people, Rhaenyra cares about you. Queen Rhaenyra is the true ruler who cares about the people, and she's feeding you, so you guys should totally rebel against the Greens. And that seems to work. The riots get stirred up. So, to answer your question, no, these food boats are not mentioned in the books. But, certainly riots and things do happen. I mean, the books, remember, don't have much detail in them. I mean, the entirety of House of the Dragon Season 2 so far, the book material that they're adapting is maybe, 20 pages long. And there's almost no dialogue in it. There's almost no, detail in it. The book just sort of says, Rhaenyra did this, and then Aemon did that, and then that army went there, and that person died, and they have to make up most of the detail. But I would say that this episode is one of the more, off-book type episodes. Most of what's going on this episode is not specified in the books. I mean, even this whole, all this stuff between Daemon and Alice, that's not in the books at all. The books say that, as far as we know, there was no interaction between Daemon and Alice, and they didn't really do anything together. So that it almost goes against the books to have all these visions that Daemon has. Although, of course, it's wonderful character work, exploring, what Daemon's motivations are, what his guilts are, so it's interesting stuff for sure. Thanks for the donation from Dad of Caesar, who says, with propaganda and misinformation playing such a decisive role in the Great Dance, what was one point of no return from the Blacks or the Greens? I would say that the death of Luke at the hands of Aemond was when war became inevitable, and the murder of Jaehaerys by Blood and Cheese seems pretty hard to come back from. So, let's have a look at the opening sequence. So the opening sequence tapestry shows all these historical events from the last 100, 200 years of Targaryen and Valyrian history, and it has now been updated. So we see this new image of a Targaryen standing triumphant over the bodies of the dragon Sunfire and the dragon Meleys. So this refers to the Battle of Rook's Rest from episode 4, when Aemond and Vhagar killed Rhaenys and Meleys, and also burned Aegon and Sunfire. You'll remember that last episode, Kristen proclaimed that it was Aegon who killed Meleys and Rhaenys, but we know it was actually Aemond and Vhagar. So I wonder if this triumphant Targaryen might represent Aegon rather than Aemond. It's a little unclear, the figure. I don't see an eye patch. But we also do see Vhagar, the green dragon, above, who was the real sort of victor of this battle. But yeah, again, it's that idea of propaganda, isn't it? The idea of, the victors write the history books. And what people believe and what people know in history might not necessarily be what really happened. And Aemond is trying to suppress the truth that it was Aemond who burned Aegon. We also see this black material dripping off Meleys's body and proceeding ahead towards the Iron Throne. So I wonder if the black might represent death, if it might represent Maester's ink, the writing of history. Maybe it represents the Blacks, Rhaenyra's team. It represents their victory, although they didn't exactly win at Rook's Rest. So I'm curious what the black represents. I'm also curious what this horizontal line work is. Maybe it's a decorative element, I don't know. But that's the updated opening sequence. And then we are in the Westerlands at the Golden Tooth. So if we have a look at the map, I can show you where the Golden Tooth is. It's one of the sort of easternmost parts of the Westerlands. So here's Casterly Rock here. This is where the Lannisters rule the Westerlands. And over here is the Golden Tooth. So this is where Jason Lannister has brought his army. The Golden Tooth is ruled by House Lefford. And so the Golden Tooth is quite close to the Riverlands, with River Run over here and Harrenhal over here. So the Greens' plan is that the Lannister army, with all the gathered armies of the Westerlands, is going to march in and attack the Riverlands, attack River Run potentially, as well as Harrenhal, while from the east, the army of Criston from the Crownlands will come up from King's Landing and attack Harrenhal. So the idea is that if they attack the Riverlands, attack Daemon, attack Caraxes from both sides at once, they should be able to overwhelm him and potentially win the war by, taking out Daemon and Caraxes and the Riverlords. That's kind of the main force that Rhaenyra has right now. Although Rhaenyra also has the Northmen marching down from the north and the Vale men marching from the Vale of Arryn. Any day now, they should start to turn up. So let's see what happens. So, that's where the Golden Tooth is, and Jason Lannister rocks up with some 7,000, 8,000 men. He feels the need to show off. He tells Lord Lefford that, you have 500 fighting men, but I have 8,000 fighting men, just like in Season 1. Remember when Jason Lannister was courting Rhaenyra? And Jason was saying that, I have so much money, and I could build you a dragon pit, and I'm so cool. It's the same energy that we're getting now, where Jason is saying, I have the best army, and blah, 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 I'm so cool. But Jason also says, we're actually not going to march straight on into the Riverlands. I want Aemon Targaryen to come up and support us with Vhagar. Which makes sense, because if Jason marches his army into the Riverlands, there's a pretty good chance that Daemon on the dragon Caraxes is going to burn their army and he's going to die. So Jason would really like Vhagar to come and help to protect him from Caraxes, which infuriates Aemond. So again, it's that thing, like we saw at Rook's Rest, that armies are kind of useless in the face of dragons. Dragons are what will really win this war, but the dragons are all controlled by Targaryens, who don't want to risk their own lives necessarily. So that's part of the issue here. It's also quite funny that Jason Lannister brings actual lions, actual animals, lions in cages with his army. Like, what is the purpose here? Are these lions for entertainment? Are these lions a show of wealth? Is he going to unleash these lions and try to use them in battle? I don't know. It's quite funny. It's quite odd. In the books, the Lannisters have lions in the bowels of Casterly Rock in cages. And the books mention that Cersei Lannister, bravely, put her hand inside the cage and the lion licked her fingers. But Jaime Lannister was too afraid to touch the lions. There's a history of lions in Casterly, in the Westerlands. A lot of them have been hunted. The lions have been hunted almost to extinction in the Westerlands, but some still remain, it seems. So there's a kind of an irony that the Lannisters have the lion on their sigil, but they keep the lions in cages, whereas the Targaryens have dragons on their sigils, and they actually use the dragons, flying and being free and cool. So there's always some fun irony to the heraldry. So Lord Lefford here, who rules the Golden Tooth, is a bit put upon having to host and accommodate Jason. I don't think Jason would be the easiest guest in your home. I imagine Jason might be quite demanding, so Lord Lefford has to deal with that, apparently, until Jason sees fit to actually march east. So Aemond is the regent. He is ruling in King Aegon's name, and he's outraged by Jason demanding that Aemond come and help him with Vhagar. And Tyland Lannister, who's on the small council, is uncomfortable because he is the twin brother of Jason, and so he has to sort of answer for Jason's issues. And then, as we said, Aemond tells Tyland to go and make an alliance with the Triarchy, which, may or may not be a good idea. And They talk about Dalton Greyjoy. Alicent does not want to marry the 16-year-old pirate Dalton Greyjoy, but they need a way to deal with the Velaryon blockade, because that's what contributes to this giant riot and the lack of food in King's Landing, so that's a whole issue. And so Aemond tells Criston to go and march west, to go attack Harrenhal, and it really seems as though Aemond is trying to remove everyone who disagrees with him. It really seems like Aemond doesn't want anyone to talk back to him. He doesn't want anyone who's going to disagree with him. Although Aemond does decide to bring Otto Hightower on as Hand of the King, even though Aemond knows that Otto is like a more moderate voice. Like, Aemond says that he doesn't want all these people who advocate patience. Aemond wants to take action. Aemond wants to go to battle. And that's part of why he removes Alicent from the council, I think. And yet Aemond does seem to respect Otto's wisdom. I mean, Otto was ruling for a long time. Otto was very smart and capable. It makes sense to want Otto. But, I mean, Alicent has similar qualifications. So it's funny that he rejects his mother, but does accept his grandfather as an advisor. It's also interesting what this means for Criston and Aemond's relationship. Like, Criston tells Aemond that most of his army burned at Rook's Rest, and he doesn't have a lot of men to go attack the Riverlands, and he doesn't have a dragon, so it's pretty dangerous for Criston to go marching into the Riverlands after what they've been through. So, you know, remember that Aemond and Criston were plotting together. They hatched a canny scheme together back in episode 1. And so for a while it looked as though Aemond and Criston were buddies, like they trusted each other. But now it seems like Aemond is going against Criston's wishes by sending Criston into the Riverlands. So that's a rift between Aemond and the Hand of the King, Criston, the Kingsguard commander, Criston, who apparently is being removed as Hand of the King. Criston is still wearing the Hand of the King chain when he marches off to war, so I don't know if Criston knows whether he's no longer the Hand of the King or not. No one tells Criston, by the way, we're making Otto Hand of the King, not you. But, yeah. So, Aemond is shaking up the small council. He's consolidating his power. He's being pretty ruthlessly pragmatic. And he fires his mother. And Alicent, of course, is devastated because her whole plan has been to try and have political influence, to try and rule through Aegon and Aemond, and try and lead the realm towards peace, try to protect the common people. But she's being kicked out, so what was it all for? It's interesting that in interviews, Ewan Mitchell was talking about how Aemond really desires love from Alicent. He just wants his mum to love and approve of him. And Alicent really does try to connect Aemond, you know, holding his face tenderly here, but Aemond rejects her and pushes her away. So as much as Aemond might want Alicent's love, he doesn't seem to know how to receive it, you know? And the politics obviously complicates their relationship and makes it a lot harder to get along. So, yeah, Aemond is asserting his power and trying to end this war. Alicent asks, have the indignities of your childhood not been sufficiently avenged? Because a big part of Aemond's motivation is that he's angry that he was bullied by Aegon and the other boys. He is angry that his eye was cut out by Luke Velaryon, and he's trying to prove himself and feel powerful and feel strong. So, like, how much longer will that motivate him, you know? If Aegon does die, if Aemond does become king, what kind of ruler will he be? Will Aemond ever find some chill, is the question. Thanks for the donation from Henning, who says that those lions are like Chekhov's lions. Yeah, Chekhov's gun is the idea that if you introduce something like a gun in a story, it has to be used, it has to go off, otherwise why did you put the gun in the story? George R. R. Martin said something about the direwolves. In the books, Nymeria leads these direwolves, Arya's wolf, Nymeria. And there's all these mentions of, there's this giant wolf pack in the Riverlands. It sure will be interesting to see what happens with that giant wolf pack. And George Martin has said in interviews that you don't introduce a giant wolf pack in a story if you're not going to use it, like Chekhov's gun. Of course, in Game of Thrones Season 7, Nymeria does see Nymeria with this giant wolf pack, and the wolf pack does not do anything in Game of Thrones. But in the books, there's all this speculation that the wolf pack might actually join the battle for Winterfell or join battle against the Freys in the Riverlands. There's lots of cool possibilities. Thanks for the super chat from Zeus Juice, who says, "What do you think of Amon's frustration? Do you think that he is emulating his brother?" I think that Aemond is trying to be different to his brother Aegon. I think Aemond has always defined himself in opposition to Aegon and is showing that I am pragmatic, I am focused, I am knowledgeable, I studied the blade, I studied philosophy, and therefore Aemond thinks of himself as more qualified and more capable. So I don't think he wants to be like Aegon. I think he wants to be unlike Aegon, and I think that he is unlike Aegon. But I think it's really interesting that Aemond intimidates his brother Aegon and sort of threatens his brother Aegon, but he does not kill his brother Aegon. Aegon is a huge threat to Aemond, because Aegon could say, "Hey, everyone, Aemond burned me. Aemond betrayed me. I am the king, and I demand that you imprison or kill Aemond." Aegon could do that, but Aemond does not do that. So as much as Aemond does hate Aegon on some level, and even though Aemond betrayed and burned Aegon, I think Aemond must have some love for his brother, or at least he doesn't want to murder his brother in cold blood, unlike a certain Euron Greyjoy in the Game of Thrones books. So, yeah, I think that Aemond knows that Aegon is a threat, but Aemond is not quite enough of a monster to murder his brother in cold blood, even though killing Aegon would make Aemond king and would remove the threat of Aegon revealing Aemond's betrayal. So yeah, I think the brotherly relationship between Aemond and Aegon is intriguing. And there's also this notion of kinslaying, of course, because in this world, one of the greatest crimes is killing your own family. And Aemond did kill his nephew Luke accidentally, and he did kill his cousin Rhaenys in battle, and he did betray and burn his brother Aegon, but he has not yet killed a member of his own family deliberately and in cold blood. That is a line that Aemond has not yet crossed. So will he cross that line? I think is an interesting question. Would he cross that line? And another interesting question is, like, what the hell is Alicent's life now? Like, she's been so focused on her role as a politician, as a queen for this entire series, and now she's being removed. She's being told that she's no longer useful, she's no longer needed, she's being discarded. So what the hell is her life now? She participated in the crowning of Aegon. She's partly complicit in this war that took place. I mean, Otto was more responsible, but it's like, does she even have any power to influence this war that is happening in the name of her family? So she's in a shitty position now for sure. And there's also obviously like a gendered aspect. Aemond tells that Alicent can now pursue domestic pursuits. So there's kind of this sexist notion that women should, look after the home and look after the family and do those womanly activities, while it is the job of men to do the political and the military activities. And I suppose that's part of why Aemond removes Alicent, but does welcome Otto Hightower, his grandfather, as Hand of the King. And I mean, it's kind of amazing how masterfully Aemond has just like Uno reverse betrayed, taken over the small council. I mean, remember, it was Aegon who welcomed Aemond onto this council. Like, Aemond walked into a small council meeting earlier this season, and Alicent was saying, Aemond shouldn't be here. But Aegon said, no, he's my brother. I want Aemond to be here. Aegon welcomed Aemond into the council, and then Aemond betrayed Aegon, and now he's removed Alicent, and now he's consolidated his power. So it's amazing how he's masterfully taken over, and is now making himself all but unchallenged. Thanks for the donation from Jess K, who says, it's interesting that the ship that Rhaenyra's younger boys are going on is called the Gay Abandon, while Rhaenyra is having a gay kiss with Mysaria, their father's former mistress. Yeah, Daemon's former mistress. Yeah, perhaps Mysaria is attracted to blonde people. Mysaria had a relationship with Daemon, and now she's making out with Daemon's wife, Rhaenyra. Maybe that's what Mysaria's into. It's interesting stuff. So, in the next scene, we're on Dragonstone. Corlys Velaryon is now the Hand of the Queen for Rhaenyra. I was a little bit puzzled that Corlys was made hand. He is now, like, he has the ability to rule in Rhaenyra's name. He is carrying out Rhaenyra's will. Rhaenyra brought him here because she needs someone to help her. She needs, like, a male authority to support her. Corlys has all this war experience. Corlys has this fleet. Corlys has all this money. But right after Corlys becomes hand, he goes back to Driftmark and talks to Alan and says, hey, we need to sail to Sharp Point to pick up the Bar Emmons. I was confused. Like, isn't Corlys meant to be on Dragonstone, on the Black Council, supporting Rhaenyra? I was sort of puzzled by that. But in any case, on the Black Council, Rhaenyra and Jace hatched this plan last episode where they want to get new dragon riders. Let's do a little dragon corner, shall we? So if we look at the dragons that are currently about, as soon as I can pull up that image, which is just over here. Here are the dragons. So the biggest dragon that had a rider on Rhaenyra's side was Meleys, and now it's dead. So they need a big dragon to challenge Vhagar, the biggest dragon in the world. We got our first glimpse of Stormcloud this episode, which is fun. Little hatchling dragon, which is bonded to Aegon Targaryen, one of the younger sons of Daemon and Rhaenyra. So Jace and Rhaenyra decided that they need to get riders for some of the unclaimed dragons. So last season we saw Vermithor, which is probably the second biggest dragon in the world after Vhagar. And so Vermithor and Silverwing and Seasmoke. Seasmoke was once ridden by Laenor Velaryon. They want to find riders for these guys. There are also wild dragons. Daemon mentioned the wild dragons last season, and in the books their names are Cannibal, Greyghost, and Sheepstealer. They could also potentially get riders. And so the belief is that you need the blood of the Targaryen family in order to ride a dragon. Only certain families with magical blood from Valyria have the power to ride dragons, and the Targaryens are the last surviving dragon-riding family from Valyria. And Steffon Darklyn from Rhaenyra's Kingsguard happens to have a little bit of Targaryen blood, because his grandmother's grandmother was a Targaryen princess. That particular detail is not in the books. The books do say that Steffon tries to claim Seasmoke and dies, but it doesn't mention that Steffon has some Targaryen blood. It does make a lot more sense, knowing that Steffon has some Targaryen blood. Otherwise, it seems quite foolish to try and claim a dragon. But yeah, so apparently Steffon's grandmother's grandmother was named Arianna Targaryen, which is a name that's not in the books. It is unusual for the Targaryens, for a Targaryen woman to marry a non-Targaryen family, because that gives dragon blood to another family. Like, often Velaryon women marry into the Targaryen family, but even then that keeps the dragon blood in the Targaryen name, you know? So it's interesting that in Hot D lore, the Targaryens gave the Darklands dragon blood. It kind of makes sense that they would intermarry with the Darklands, though, because the Darklands of Duskendale are close to Dragonstone, where the Targaryens have been for a few hundred years. 200 years? Some number of years, about 200 years. So yeah, see like Duskendale is one of the largest towns in the vicinity of Dragonstone, so the Darklands would be one of the more powerful families, so it makes sense that the Targaryens might intermarry with the Darklands, so it makes sense that Steffon might have some Targaryen blood. But it is a little unusual that it was a Targaryen woman being married into the Darkland family. Jess K, thanks for the donation, says it's possible that she married a Velaryon, who married a Massey, who married a Celtigar, etc. Yeah, I suppose that's true. There are multiple ways that Targaryen blood could have made its way into the Darkland family. Maybe it was through other families. But still, generally, for the purpose of keeping the dragon blood in the family, the Targaryen women only marry Targaryen men. I don't think there's any examples in the books at this time where a Targaryen woman has married a non-Targaryen man. I might have to double check that. Anyway, so the point is that Steffon has some Targaryen blood and might be able to ride a dragon. And so Stefan agrees to try to claim a dragon, even though it's very dangerous. And I think part of the context here is that Stefan's father just got killed by Criston Cole. At the sack of Duskendale previously, we saw Lord Gunther Darkland being beheaded by Criston. And so Stefan is angry that his father is dead and he wants to get revenge. And I think that's part of what motivates him to take this risk and to try to claim this dragon. Even knowing that it's a dangerous thing to try and do. And it's kind of a crazy thing to do in a lot of people's eyes. There has not been a non-Targaryen dragon rider, aside from Laenor Velaryon and Laena Velaryon, ever in Westeros. There has never... it's only been Velaryons and Targaryens. And so you see Bartimaeus Celtigar, in particular, saying, hey, like, this is a crazy idea. I don't think you should do this. Bartimaeus really objects to this attempt. And I think that it makes sense that Bartimaeus in particular objects, because Bartimaeus is Valyrian. So, like, the Celtigars and the Velaryons, they are not dragon riding families, but they are Valyrian families, and they do feel superior as a result of being Valyrian. They do have some sense of superiority from that. So the idea of letting a non-Valyrian ride a dragon is kind of offensive to Bartimaeus, I think, as a fellow Valyrian, even if he's not a dragon-riding Valyrian. So, yeah, Stefan's into it, and it does not work very well for him, alas. Thanks for the donation from Hairless Oyster, who says, don't sleep on the 7 sons of Darklan. Thank you, Darth Lindis, who says, I'm interested to know which of the Kingsguard may have died in the riot. So yeah, the riot gets sparked by Mysaria and Rhaenyra's food donation and propaganda, and it does seem as though Leon Estamont may have died. So Leon Estamont is one of the 3 Kingsguard who Aegon put on the Kingsguard. They were like his rando drinking buddies, and Aegon decided that they should be Kingsguard, which is probably a terrible decision because Kingsguard are meant to be amazing warriors. They're meant to be dedicated and honor-bound, whereas these guys do not seem up to the task. And so it's cool seeing a consequence of Aegon's dumb decision when Leon Estamont foolishly cuts off a civilian's hand during this riot, which makes the riot escalated and makes it more violent. And it does look as though the people turn against Leon, and it looks as though Leon might die. I mean, remember the riot in Game of Thrones Season 2, when a bunch of people were killed, including the Pope. The High Septon was killed in Game of Thrones in a riot. So it's, yeah, it's a very dangerous and silly thing to escalate a riot like that. So R.I.P. Leon Estamont, maybe? I think Red Ned was also caught up in there. Maybe Red Ned is dead as well. We don't see exactly what happens. So, and also, meanwhile, you know, Rhaenyra's Kingsguard, as far as we know, Rhaenyra only has the 2 Kingsguards, Stefan and Laurent, and now Stefan has been burned, so Rhaenyra only has 1 person on her Kingsguard instead of the requisite 7, whereas Aegon now has maybe 6 or 5, we don't quite know for sure. So then we get to Harrenhal, and Daemon is having more crazy dreams. So Daemon is having visions because Harrenhal seems to be cursed by the magic of the old gods, which is connected to the weirwood trees, and Alice Rivers, this mysterious witch, is maybe causing these dreams. Maybe she's a green seer who has the magic of the old gods. Daemon's also sleeping on a weirwood bed, which can give visions. Daemon also drank that mysterious potion, which may have given him visions. So yeah, there's a lot of good reasons why he's tripping balls. And he has another vision of the throne room, and he sees Viserys saying, did you say heir for a day? So you'll remember that in Season 1, Viserys exiled Daemon, because Daemon apparently made a speech after the death of Viserys' stillborn son, Balon. And Viserys said, Viserys was furious that Daemon made this speech about the heir for a day, which seemed to be mocking the death of Viserys' son and the death of Viserys' wife. Remember, Aemma Arryn was Viserys' wife and queen in Season 1, Episode 1. So Daemon is haunted by a repetition of this traumatic moment when Daemon was rejected and exiled by his brother who he loves. And that's, you know, kind of what Daemon has been trying to make up for ever since. Daemon has been trying to claim Viserys's approval, claim Viserys's legacy, claim Viserys's throne, to try and feel worthy again after having been rejected by Viserys multiple times. So there's this really nightmarish quality where Daemon is forced to relive this traumatic moment, and he can't escape it. He can't get through the door, and he feels trapped in this trauma that he's reliving. And so then later in this episode, we see Daemon seeing Viserys with the dead body of his wife Aemma and his stillborn son Balon. And then in the dream, Daemon does comfort Viserys, because Daemon feels guilty that he wasn't comforting and supporting his brother in his brother's time of need. So it seems as though Daemon might be trying to make up for that failing and trying to heal from that wound. It maybe there's some potential for growth for Daemon here. We see him weeping. We see him kind of lose his mind a bit with Simon. Maybe we're going to see some real change in Daemon's behavior after this psychological trip that he's been undergoing, this psychological journey. Thanks for the donation from Mother Nix, who says, I find it frustrating that Daemon is mad at Simon, but not mad at Alice. Like, clearly she's spooky, but he continues to trust her? It feels confusing. Yeah, I agree. It's quite funny how Daemon blames everybody except Alice. Daemon says, "Ooh, Simon, are you causing me to have these visions? Are you working against me?" When it's quite clearly Alice Rivers who is magical and who is giving Daemon visions. So it's interesting that Alice is this blind spot for Daemon. I mean, maybe it's partly because of Alice's magic. Maybe she's messing with his head a bit. Maybe Daemon underestimates her because she's a woman. Maybe he just really likes the drugs that she gave him. I don't know. There's a few ways we could explain that, I suppose. But Alice does seem to have this unique power of getting in people's heads and manipulating people. And I think that's how she has survived here for a very long time. I mean, we learn this episode, intriguingly, that Alice was there when Larys Strong was born. And Lionel Strong seems to have gotten angry at Alice Rivers and accused Alice Rivers of doing evil magic to cause Larys's body to be deformed. So Alice has been around for a while, and despite the Lord of Harrenhal, Lionel Strong, getting angry at her, she's still here, and Lionel isn't. So Alice clearly has a incredible ability to stick around and to endure and to manipulate, and I'm fascinated to see that continue with Daemon. And now we've got Kristen and his army, and Jason and his army converging on Harrenhal as well. Harrenhal is like this central strategic location, and Alice is at its heart. So I wonder what role Alice will continue to play. And I wonder what Alice's motivation is in general. I mean, it's really interesting that Alice apparently assassinates Lord Paramount Grover Tully. Apparently to help Daemon, because now that Grover is dead and Oscar is in charge, there's more of a possibility of the Tullys getting involved and the Tullys leading the Riverlands. Because the Tullys are officially the overlords who rule over the Freys and the Blackwoods and the Brackens. So Oscar Tully is key to getting the Riverlands in line. So it might be a bit of a problem that Daemon was so rude to Oscar previously, but we'll see how that plays out. So, Daemon really kind of snaps with all of his visions. Daemon really gets a bit manic and unhinged and accuses Simon of plotting against him. So, Daemon is really losing the plot, so Daemon decides to run away. And Alice points out that this is what Daemon always does. Daemon ran away from King's Landing, he ran away from the Stepstones, he ran away from Pentos, now he ran away from Dragonstone. Now he's running away from Harrenhal. He seems unable to face obstacles and to face opposition and to deal with his internal demons. So it's really interesting that Alice says, wait, don't leave, stay for 3 more days. And I think Alice tells Daemon to stay for 3 more days because Alice is going to go and kill Grover. But I also think that Alice wants Daemon to complete his therapy, because it's after Daemon stays that he then has this additional dream where he does comfort Viserys and in which he says sorry to Viserys. I think this might be the first episode where we've seen Daemon say please and we've seen Daemon say sorry. Daemon finds some humility this episode, and he finds a way to confront his own failings. And so I think this might potentially be a really a moment of change for Daemon's character. Thanks for the donation from Colton, who says, do you think the lack of book content is responsible for the grueling pace of this season so far? I do think this has been a slow season. I don't think it's because of a lack of book content. There is, like, plenty more book content. I mean, there's a lot of pages to cover still. I feel like if the show continues at its current slow pace, it's going to take like 5 or 6 seasons total to tell the entirety of this story. Unless they speed up, I think it's going to take a bunch more seasons. The showrunners haven't said how many seasons House of the Dragon will be. There have been a bunch of suggestions that maybe it'll be 4 seasons, maybe it'll be 5 seasons. I think it's going to take at least 5 seasons, because this has been a fairly slow season. And yeah, it's not due to lack of book content. That there is plenty of stuff ahead that they could be covering, but I think they're making a choice to pace themselves, and they're making a choice to really sort of marinate and explore the characters in depth. They're not wanting to rush it, is the sense that I'm getting. I mean, they're not wanting to do what Game of Thrones Season 7 and Game of Thrones Season 8 did, which was fast forward through everything and really go at breakneck speed. It seems like they're really trying to invest in the characters and trying to really deepen the relationships before they move on to all the battles and the resolutions. So yeah, it's I'm surprised by the slow pace, but we'll see how it continues. By the way, I also find it fascinating to see the dragon Caraxes sitting next to this weirwood at Harrenhal. I mean, these are like 2 of the like opposite poles of magic in this world. I mean, Alice in this scene talks about there are powers more ancient than man, you know, like she talks about old magic and power. And I feel that the weirwoods connected to the old gods are one of those ancient powers. They have been here long before humans were, connected to the children of the forest and connected to nature and connected to ancient spirits. And the dragons are also an ancient and mysterious power who may have been created through some ancient blood magic that the Valyrians did in the distant, distant past. And I would say that another ancient magic power is the White Walkers, who have also been mentioned this episode through Aegon's dream of a darkness from the north. So it's really cool to see those magical powers evoked here. And I wonder, like, what Alice sees is the connection. Like, what is the connection between, like, Daemon's destiny and these ancient magical powers? Because Alice says that, like, you are just a piece on the board. You are subject to these mystic powers. Does Alice have some vision of the future? Does Alice have some plan or some belief about what Daemon's destiny is? Because, like, why else would Alice be helping Daemon? It's strange that Alice was criticizing Daemon for all of those Blackwood atrocities that he ordered. Alice disapproves of a lot of Daemon's actions, and yet Alice seems to be helping Daemon by assassinating Grover and trying to advise him on how he can rally the Riverlands. Why is Alice helping this violent, chaotic man who does these evil crimes of which she disapproves? I think it's really intriguing. Thanks for the donation from KAMJE, who says, how do you think Game of Thrones would have gone if they had used the old gods like they do in House of the Dragon, especially with how Daemon reacts to them? Yeah, I mean, in the Game of Thrones books, lots of characters have crazy dreams. Like, not just Bran, but also Jon and Jaime and Cersei, and lots of characters have trippy dreams. And it's a way of exploring character, unpacking character, and in connecting with ideas of magic and prophecy. And yeah, it would have been really cool if they had crazy dreams like Daemon is having in Game of Thrones. That would have been really nice to hear. That would have been nice to unpack characters more, but they mostly avoided doing that. I mean, you know, Bran in the later seasons of Game of Thrones was meant to be this three-eyed raven, this magical figure connected to the old gods, but it never really explored what that means. Bran talked vaguely about destiny, but we never got any kind of detail or like visions or explanation of what he actually knows and what his decisions have been. There was very little to Bran. I mean, Bran wasn't even in Game of Thrones Season 5. So yeah, the whole old gods thing was very undercooked in Game of Thrones. So I'm glad that they're exploring it more deeply in Hot D, and I'm curious where it's gonna go. Thanks Kaiser, who says Alice Rivers talking about how she and Daemon are pawns makes me wonder if she sees history at a grander scale. Yeah, so I mean, the old gods are old. They've been around for a long time, and when Bran connects to the old gods in the books, he can see through time. He can see ancient times. And Greenseers can also have inklings of the future as well. So, I mean, Alice, according to the actor, may be 400 years old. Very curious how she's able to live that long. I mean, like Bloodraven in the books lives for a long time because he's like physically enmeshed with the trees. It's not clear how Alice can live so long. Is Alice undead, like Melisandre seems to be in the books? Is Alice actually secretly a child of the forest? Because children of the forest can live for a really long time. And in the books, Leaf says that she walked among the worlds of men, so maybe Alice is a child of the forest in a magical disguise. I don't know. It's very mysterious. But yeah, if Alice has been alive for centuries, then she would have a long view of history, wouldn't she? And maybe she has the ability to really think long term and think about what's best for the realm long term. Maybe that's part of what Alice is thinking. But I mean, the old gods can also be really sinister, really creepy, really manipulative, demanding blood sacrifice. Maybe Alice is a sinister figure. It's all up for speculation. And yeah, Alice has an owl. So it was quite funny that previously Alice said, I'm a barn owl trapped to live in human form. But no, she actually has a literal physical barn owl. And before the barn owl turns up, we see Alice standing at the weirwood tree with her eyes closed, looking like kind of weird and disconnected with her mouth partly open. It's like, what is Alice doing exactly? Is Alice praying right now? Or is Alice skin changing? Is she warging? Is she inside the mind of her owl? We did see an owl warg in Game of Thrones. We saw this fella in Season 4 who had the ability to magically control his owl. So maybe Alice Rivers is the same. Maybe Alice Rivers also has the power to control an owl, and maybe that helps her to spy and gain information, or maybe that's part of how she knows these things about Daemon. So all of that is interesting. And remember that Alice Rivers is possibly the half-sister of Larys Strong. And Larys talks about Alice in this episode. So I wonder if Alice might be a warg, then maybe Larys is a warg. And while Alice is controlling owls, maybe Larys is controlling rats, and maybe that's how Larys knows what he knows. It's wild speculation, but it's possible in the rules of this world. So, intriguing stuff. And yeah, Daemon is trying to run away with his cute little travel handbag here. And Alice says, stay, you need the help of the Tullys, and in 3 days' time, the winds will shift. And Alice suggests that the reason why Daemon is having these crazy visions might be because of the ghosts in the King's Pyre Tower. So I think that Harren the Black, who built this castle, may have died in the King's Pyre Tower, because, you know, King's Pyre suggests that a king burned in that tower, so maybe that's where Harren the Black was burned by Aegon the Conqueror and Harrenhal. So yeah, maybe those ghosts are responsible for the visions, maybe it's the swamp air. It's very funny that Daemon blames everything except Alice, who is quite clearly responsible for Daemon's dreams. It's very curious that he never figures that out. But yeah, Alice really seems to know a lot about Daemon's psychology. Like, maybe Alice has sort of read Daemon's mind with the magic of the old gods, and insists that Daemon has some kind of destiny and that there are greater powers at play. I mean, it is really interesting that Daemon continues to insist that, like, magic's not real, he's not subject to magic, he's above magic, just like Daemon denied and dismissed Viserys' dreams and visions in Season 1. Daemon said that dreams didn't make us king, dragons did. Daemon always seems to be more interested in physical power rather than mystical power. But here he is facing the reality of mystical power, so like he kind of is forced to admit that he needs Alice's help. And, Daemon also insists that he's superior. He says, I'm not like you. I'm above you. I'm a Targaryen dragon-riding prince, and therefore I'm better than you, and I'm not subject to magic powers like you are. But then, Daemon shows vulnerability. He sits on a rock, like how he sat on a rock in the Riverlands previously. And he asks for help. And he talks about his feelings. He's really hurt that the irony that Daemon wants to be Viserys' heir. Daemon wants the throne, but he doesn't get it. While Rhaenyra, who never wanted the throne, was chosen as Viserys' heir. And Alice says that, well, maybe the fact that Rhaenyra didn't want to be king is the reason why she's deserving of the throne. Maybe Rhaenyra will be a good ruler because she doesn't want to be the ruler. It's not a prize, it's a burden. And we saw how that burden destroyed Viserys, and we see how Rhaenyra struggles with that burden. And we see how Aegon crumbled under that burden. And I think it's fairly clear that Daemon is unsuited for that burden. He really seems to struggle dealing with a few Riverlords. How the hell is he going to deal with the throne of Westeros? So, yeah, interesting questions. And yeah, Alice insists that he needs the help of the Tullys, so Alice goes and apparently kills Grover Tully to help Daemon rally the Riverlands. So really curious to see if Daemon will succeed in rallying the Riverlands, turning them into an army. I'm curious to see what he will do with that army. Will he support Rhaenyra or will he support himself? And I'm curious what Alice's plans are. Thanks for the donation from Ada Crowley, who says that Daemon finally had a breakthrough using psychedelic therapy. Thanks, Dr. Alice. Yeah, maybe there was some therapeutic psilocybin or something that was in that special potion. Gio Ree says, what was the importance of the one cricket not singing? Yeah, it's really funny that Helena has established herself as someone who has dreams of the future and has special knowledge. So when Helena says, oh, one of my pet crickets is not singing anymore, why isn't this cricket singing? We've got to wonder if there's some special meaning to that. We've got to wonder, like, is there some symbolic or prophetic significance to the cricket not singing? And I don't know. I don't know what that might mean. The cricket not singing, I mean, is the cricket dead? Is the cricket Lord Grover Tully, who is now dead? The singing sounds a bit like the Dragon Keepers were singing that song for Sea Smoke earlier. Daemon sang to Vermithor. I think no longer singing. I mean, Stefan Darklyn is no longer singing after his death. Maybe it means something like that. Or maybe it's just a dead bug. Who knows? Not everything needs to be a prophecy, I suppose. Andrea in the live chat says maybe it's that Alicent no longer has a voice at council. Yeah, I mean, Aegon starts talking again. So I don't think Aegon is the cricket who is no longer singing, because Aegon is now speaking. He has now regained consciousness. Austin says the cricket is the dragon Seasmoke, because he found a rider. Well, yeah, that's true. Seasmoke was making those sort of sing-song-like vocalizations. Like, Seasmoke was lonely, flying around Driftmark and Dragonstone. But now that Seasmoke has claimed Adam, maybe Seasmoke is no longer singing. Yeah, I think that makes some sense. Jess in the live chat says, it means she's nuts, man. Maybe that's it. Ms. J says that Daeron was mentioned to be good with a lute. Yeah, maybe Daeron is no longer singing and is now fighting instead, starting to join the war. Someone says that maybe it's that Aegon is no longer singing in that Aegon is not going to blame Aemond because Aemond intimidated him. Yeah, I think those are all interesting possibilities. So, yeah, anyway, thanks for the donation from Big Man, who says, what do you think of the portrayal of Hugh? Is it accurate to the book? Yeah, well, Hugh is like a family man in the show, isn't he? Like, Hugh loves his wife Kat and loves his daughter and is trying to save his family and feed his family. And he's starting to undergo an arc because previously Kat was saying that, we might have to do something drastic. We might have to do something immoral in order to feed our family. And Hugh was saying, no, 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 like, we wouldn't do anything bad. We wouldn't steal from our neighbors. But now in this episode, Hugh punches a guy in the face and takes food from him, and he assaults some guy in order to get food to feed his family. So, like, Hugh is capable of doing immoral violence to feed his family. So Hugh is becoming a more brutal character, I suppose. And in the books, Hugh, early on is described as a brute at one point. So, it's they're giving him an arc, and so I wonder if Hugh will continue to be sympathetic or if he might go down a dark path. We shall see. Thank you, Joseph, who says, how long can dragons live if they die from natural causes? Maybe the blacks should stall so that Rhaenyra's dragons can grow up a bit. Yeah, so I think that one of the... I think the only dragon that we know of dying of old age is Balerion. Balerion died... was like hundreds of years old when Balerion died. So, some of the older dragons are described as being kind of sleepy and grouchy. Here's the official artwork from Rise of the Dragon of Balerion dying of old age, with Viserys mourning him. So yeah, it seems as though dragons can die of old age, and apparently dragons just keep on growing until they die. They never stop growing, so they can get bigger and bigger and bigger. Maybe Balerion just collapsed under his own weight eventually. I don't know. So yeah, apparently dragons can die of old age, but more often they seem to die in violence. So we were talking about Daemon at Harrenhal, and then we see Steffon Darkland try to claim the dragon Seasmoke. The Dragon Keepers are this sort of monastic monk-like order who care for the dragons and guard the dragons, and they seem to have a almost religious ideology. They almost worship the dragons, which is fascinating. That is different to the books. In the books, the Dragon Keepers are just guards who wear armor, and it doesn't mention this sort of religious aspect. So I think it's cool how they added that. It's also extremely metal when Seasmoke burns Steffon and also burns one of the Dragon Keepers. And then we see one of the Dragon Keepers cutting his own throat with a dragonglass dagger, which is extremely metal and disturbing. And this is something that Ryan Condal, I think, talked about earlier. On Ryan Condal's podcast previously, Ryan said that each Dragon Keeper has a dragonglass dagger, and they make these dragonglass daggers in a kind of ceremony, like the way that a Jedi creates their own lightsaber. So this dagger is like this special ritual object. And Ryan hinted that there is a specific purpose that the Dragon Keepers have the daggers for that we will find out. So I wonder if the special purpose of these dragonglass daggers, the reason the Dragon Keepers have them, is in order to cut their own throats if they are ever burned by a dragon. Because it seems that being burned is a occupational hazard for the Dragon Keepers. We've seen like burns and, ash and sort of scorch marks on the Dragon Keepers' bodies and clothes previously. So it seems like being burned by dragons occasionally is something that just happens to the Dragon Keepers, because the dragons are dangerous beasts, even to their own allies. So yeah, disturbing stuff. And of course, it's very interesting that Seasmoke rejects Steffon. Why did Seasmoke kill Steffon and not accept Steffon as his rider? One possibility, maybe, is that Steffon doesn't have enough Targaryen blood. Maybe the dragons will only ride someone with more Targaryen blood, a true Targaryen. Maybe Seasmoke felt that Steffon was not brave enough. We see how Steffon tiptoes towards Seasmoke. Like, Steffon is clearly terrified of Seasmoke. Maybe dragons prefer to be ridden by someone who is brave and powerful. Maybe the dragon rejects Steffon because he's not a lord. He's not a high-ranking noble Targaryen. He's merely a Darklan Kingsguard sworn to serve the Targaryens. Perhaps dragons respect dominance and respect power and don't respect servility. I think there's a lot of different ways that we could speculate on why Seasmoke rejects Stefan. And George R. R. Martin, in a recent blog post, was saying that, this is a mystery, and the books will explore more about, who dragons choose. I think it's important also that the dragons have personalities. They have individual preferences and personalities. And maybe, Seasmoke just doesn't like the cut of Stefan's jib. Maybe they just don't vibe. Maybe he just doesn't like Stefan on a personal level, and that's why he burns him. Who knows? Of course, Seasmoke later goes and connects with Adam. And Adam is potentially the half-brother of Laenor Velaryon, who was the previous rider of Seasmoke. So maybe Seasmoke feels a connection to Laenor specifically and wants to have a rider who is connected to Laenor and Laenor's family. There's also the whole question of, is Laenor still alive? Because in the books, it seems as though Laenor really is killed by Carl Corrie, whereas in the TV show in Season 1, Rhaenyra and Daemon faked Laenor's death, and Laenor was secretly still alive. So, is Laenor still alive? Is it possible for Seasmoke to be claimed while Laenor is still alive? I think the fact that Adam claims Seasmoke suggests that Laenor may now be dead, because there are hints in the books that this magical connection allows dragons to know when their rider is alive and to know where their rider is. So the fact that Seasmoke now accepts a rider, I think might be an indication that Rhaenyra's ex-husband Laenor is now dead, which is something that she will have to grapple with, perhaps. I like how they really linger on Rhaenyra, watching with horror as Stefan is burned alive. Rhaenyra is really disturbed by watching this man burn alive, which you would be, and Rhaenyra feels horribly guilty about this. And I think that's part of why Rhaenyra slaps Bartimaeus Celtigar, is that Rhaenyra feels offended that Bartimaeus is saying, oh, it's your fault that Stefan's dead. And Rhaenyra's like, I know. Rhaenyra is really feeling that and really sensitive about that, and she feels guilty. So she does not want Bartimaeus lambasting her in her ear like that. So maybe that's why she reacts that way. So yeah, this feels like a terrible failure. Maybe it was a dumb idea to let non-Targaryens try and ride dragons. Maybe that was a dumb idea. And yet, Adam claims Seasmoke. And it's really, really interesting that Adam is riding Seasmoke, because as far as we know, in the books or in the show, Adam does not have Targaryen blood. Laenor and Laena Velaryon could ride dragons because they were the children of Rhaenys Targaryen. They had Targaryen blood. But Adam, he's the son of Corlys and some unknown woman. I guess it's possible that that unknown woman is a dragon seed. I mean, we know that people like Ulf are floating around. There are random bastards and people who have some Targaryen blood, especially on Dragonstone and Driftmark. I guess it's also possible that Corlys has some Targaryen blood, because the Velaryons have intermarried with the Targaryens for a while in the books, and as far as we know, it's only Velaryon women marrying into the Targaryen family, as opposed to Targaryens marrying into the Velaryon family. But it's possible that Corlys has some Targaryen blood. But I mean, it's interesting, if the Velaryons have had dragon blood for a while, why weren't there more Velaryon dragon riders? So yeah, it's a really open question. And, Corlys still hasn't acknowledged Adam or Alan as his sons. It's still a mystery what their exact family tree is. So yeah, these are all open questions. What is the criteria to claim a dragon? Who has the Targaryen blood? How much Targaryen blood do you need? Do you really need Targaryen blood at all? Those are open, mysterious questions. So, then we're on Driftmark, and we have this scene with Corlys and Alan. So Corlys asks Alan to join his ship as first mate, his right-hand man on the ship, and Alan is reluctant. And I think the reason why Alan is reluctant is that Alan resents that Corlys has not acknowledged him. Corlys does want Alan to be on his ship, but Corlys has never said, Alan, you are my son. I acknowledge you as my son publicly. And I think Alan is hurt by that. And I think that's part of why Alan is wearing this thing on his head to hide his stubble, his white hair. It seems as though Alan has white Valyrian hair because he is Corlys' son. And yet Alan hides that. He doesn't want to be associated with Corlys if he's not going to be acknowledged by Corlys. It's the pain of being unacknowledged by your father. Whereas Adam does think that Alan should embrace this opportunity because it could give huge social advancement to Alan and Adam. And yeah, it mentions Lord Bar Emin, who is another minor lord in the Crown Lands. Bar Emin is on Sharp Point, which is over here. So the Bar Emins are another sort of minor Crown Lands house, along with the Stauntons and Rosbys and Stokeworths and Celtigars and so on. Thanks for the donation from Samba Siwi, who says, do the Dragon Keepers sing specific songs for specific dragons, or do they sing out to the dragons in hopes that the right one will step up? Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think that we've, like, here this Dragon Keeper refers to Sea Smoke by name, so I guess the dragons know their names, and you can just say, hey, Vermithor, come here, boy. Come on, Verma. Come on, Vermi. Like, maybe they can just talk to them by name. But yeah, I mean, maybe each of the dragons have their own theme songs. I don't know. I'm not sure if the song that the Dragon Keepers sing, I don't know if it's the same song that Daemon sings to Vermithor in Season 1. Maybe that's like the generic calling dragons over here thing. But it is an interesting question, like yeah, why Sea Smoke? Because I suppose that they could have tried to get Stefan to claim Vermithor or Silverwing just as equally as they could have tried to claim Sea Smoke. Maybe they could have tried to claim some of the wild dragons, like Grey Ghost or the Cannibal, if Stefan was brave enough. Maybe Rhaenyra thinks that Sea Smoke is the most likely to accept a rider because Sea Smoke was most recently ridden. Although, I mean, Rhaenyra might also think that, as far as I know, Laenor is still alive, so maybe Sea Smoke wouldn't accept a new rider because Laenor might still be alive. Maybe Sea Smoke was a bad choice for that reason. I don't know. So, yeah, Stefan gets burned, and Alan reluctantly agrees to join Corlys on his ship. Where is Corlys going on his ship? He's going to Sharp Point, and then he's... What I don't think they've actually said, like, where the Velaryon fleet is going. Like, Alan mentions that we may face lions or krakens, like they're expecting that the Lannister fleet or the Greyjoy fleet might attack the Velaryon blockade. So I guess Corlys is just, like, shoring up the Velaryon blockade and making it stronger. I guess that's what's going on, but yeah, I find it a little puzzling. So, then we get an unexpected combo of characters. We see Ulf, who is that common person in King's Landing who claims to be a bastard son of Baelon Targaryen. And we see Diana, who used to work in the Red Keep, but then she was fired after Aegon assaulted her. And we see Sylvie, who is the brothel madam who we've seen intimate with Aemond. And so Diana and Sylvie do this performance where they say, oh, you know, Aegon and Aemond and the Greens, they're terrible because we don't get food, but the Greens are feasting, and the Greens are having sex workers and parties and dances in the Red Keep, while we are starving, and that is so wrong. So that is the plan that Mysaria and Rhaenyra are hatching, where Mysaria was saying, hey, let's use the common people. And so she sent Alinda Massey to talk to Diana, and I suppose Diana knows Sylvie. I'm curious, like, how Diana and Mysaria know Sylvie. Like, Mysaria was, like, a brothel keeper or a sex worker at one point, so maybe that's how she knows Sylvie, who is a brothel madam. And Diana was at the Red Keep. I mean, maybe there were sex workers coming into the Red Keep, and that's how Diana knows people. I'm curious how these people know each other. But in any case, this is Rhaenyra and Mysaria's plan. They are spreading discontent. They are spreading rumors and gossip saying that the Greens are feasting without us, which I think is a lie. Like, we haven't seen Aemond or Alicent having feasts and dances. That doesn't seem in Aemond or Alicent's character. So Mysaria is spreading lies to turn the people against the Greens, and it succeeds, and it leads to this riot. And I think it's funny how Diana and Sylvie, they specifically spread these rumors through Ulf. Because Ulf is, as we saw, like this charismatic party boy who's friends with everyone. And Ulf is also a giant blabbermouth because Ulf we saw him, like, telling, hey, don't tell anyone, but I'm the bastard son of the Targaryens, and I don't like Aegon, I like Rhaenyra. Like, Ulf was loudly saying that previously, so Ulf is a good choice of a person to try and use to spread rumors. Thanks for the donation from Colt Foster, who says that the cricket represents Alicent. It fits with her window motif. Yeah, I think that is clever, Colt Foster, because Alicent is kind of caged here. Like, Rhaenys talked about Alicent being in a prison with a window, and that's like the crickets, because the crickets, Helena's pet crickets, are in these little cages, and I suppose Alicent is like those caged crickets when she has no power. Yeah, I think that's an interesting parallel. Pablo, thanks for the donation, who says, the prerequisite to claim and ride a dragon is not Targaryen blood, but rather Valyrian blood. Hence, Adam has Valyrian blood. Yeah, Adam does have Valyrian blood, because the Velaryons are a Valyrian family. I think that Valyrian blood is not enough, though, because the Valyrian Empire was this whole big thing in Valyria, and there were lots of Valyrian people, and not all Valyrians could ride dragons. It is only the dragon lords, the dragon riding families that could ride dragons. In his recent blog post, George Martin said that there were about 40 dragon riding families, and the Targaryens were one of those dragon riding families. And in the Doom of Valyria, all of the dragon riding families died except the Targaryens. So I think that it is pretty clear in the lore that only Targaryens can ride dragons, and other Valyrian families like the Velaryons and the Celtigars can't ride dragons, or else there would probably have been some Celtigar or Velaryon dragon riders in the past, right? So, I think that is what the lore is saying. But of course, Jace was questioning it, and the fact that Adam has a dragon is pretty interesting, so maybe the rules are different to what we thought they were. So, Diana and Sylvie successfully spread rumors to turn people against the Greens. It's interesting that Sylvie is participating in this. Like, Sylvie has this intimate relationship with Aemond, and yet Sylvie is now spreading word against Aemond. We saw how Sylvie was telling Aemond, like, hey, I think you should protect the common people. I think that you should not be getting common people killed. So it seems like based on Sylvie's conversations and a relationship with Aemond, she's decided that Aemond is not a good ruler, and I guess she's sort of turning against Aemond. But I wonder, like, is Aemond still seeing Sylvie? Does Aemond still have a relationship with Sylvie? Is he still hiring her services? I don't suppose we know. But, like, if they do hook up again, how is Sylvie gonna feel, like, having secretly betrayed Aemond like this? I think that's really interesting. And I also wonder, like, is it in the common people's interests to cause this riot? I mean, common people died in this riot, probably, right? I mean, it's like, Mysaria and Sylvie say that they care about the common people, but there are innocents dying in this riot, so it's kind of fraught, like, using the common people for the greater good in a way that might get innocent people killed. So Bartimus Celtigar says, hey Rhaenyra, it was dumb to get Stefan to claim a dragon. It's your fault that Stefan is dead. And Rhaenyra gets angry and she slaps Bartimus because she feels that Bartimus needs to respect her and needs to fear her as a ruler. And Rhaenyra feels that if she was a man, she wouldn't be treated like this. She feels like these men see her like they see their mothers and daughters. They see like they can talk down to her. They see like they need to protect her and coddle her. When if Rhaenyra is to rule, she needs to be seen as a strong and dangerous and powerful ruler who incites fear. And so throughout this episode and throughout this series, Rhaenyra sort of explores male power. She holds a sword, she rides her dragon, she makes out with a woman, she does things that are traditionally considered male activities. And so she's struggling against the confines of her female gender role and trying to be respected as a leader. Thanks for the donation from Lady Goblet, who says, do you think Helena will ever be vindicated for her seeing gifts? Why hasn't she sat with Aegon? Yeah, so it is sad and tragic that no one is acknowledging that Helena can see the future. I could see this happening in a really tragic way. Like, maybe people will only start listening to Helena when it's already too late. Like, maybe people will start listening to Helena, but things are already gone to shit, and it's no longer useful. That's often how prophecies work in this world. But yeah, I really hope people start listening to Helena. And Lady Goblet says, just to quibble, but Mazaria and Rhaenyra did not have a lesbian kiss. Both have been with men. Maybe their gender is more fluid. Yeah, I was quoting, I was reading a donation message when I spoke that term, lesbian kiss. Yeah, I don't think there's evidence or any reason to like describe Rhaenyra or Mazaria as lesbian or gay or anything. Rhaenyra clearly is attracted to men like Harwin and Daemon. Maybe Mazaria is gay. We don't know. Well, I mean, Mazaria must have been attracted to Daemon. Some, you would think. I think that Mazaria was attracted to Daemon when they were lovers. So yeah, I don't think that Mazaria or Helena. I don't think that Mazaria or Rhaenyra are homosexual. I guess they might both be bi, or maybe they're just exploring this situation. We don't need to put labels on it. I mean, this is like a fantasy show about a medieval world with giant lizards in it. I don't think we necessarily need to put our modern labels onto their behavior. The way that Rhaenyra and Mazaria understand sexual orientation is probably very different to how we see and label sexual orientation. And also, interestingly, Rhaenyra says in this episode that she wants to be a man, or has some feeling that she wishes she was a man. So even like Rhaenyra's gender identity itself is fluid, perhaps. So yeah, the whole notion of orientation and gender identity is complicated and ambiguous, and I don't feel the need to put our labels on it. I think what matters is that Rhaenyra is exploring her gender, and I think that Rhaenyra and Mazaria are attracted to each other. Mazaria was saying that, hey, Your Grace, you look hot with that sword, she was basically saying. They're both beautiful people who are attracted to each other, and they need each other, and they need intimacy. I think they are both lonely. They're craving physical intimacy. And also, like, I think there's a lot of sort of symbolism in that they both have been frustrated by men. They've both been frustrated with male forms of power. And so now they are embracing a different kind of power and a different kind of relationship, a feminine kind of power. I mean, you know, Mazaria was saying that there are other ways to rule. We don't have to rule by fighting. We can rule by using rumors and propaganda and politics. And so she's offering this different kind of political influence, which we could characterize as like a more feminine kind of power, as opposed to the violent male swinging swords kind of power. And so I think Rhaenyra is like embracing that when she embraces Mazaria. And yeah, there's also just an element of like, oh boy, men suck. Let's just love each other as women as a result of how much men suck. I think there's a lot of different layers in how you can interpret that, and I think there's a lot of different valid interpretations of what's going on there. But yeah, most of all, they clearly want each other. And so, yeah, I'm really curious, like, could they be lovers? Could they be together? I mean, I guess comparison is Jane Arryn. So Jane Arryn, who was in this episode, the ruler of the Vale, she is famously unmarried. Jane is said to be, Jane is very strongly hinted to be gay in the books, because Jane has this, quote, close companion called Jessamine Redfort, illustrated here by Riot Art the Right. And so Jane has this long-term relationship with several women, and so it seems pretty clear that she's gay, and that's why she doesn't marry a man. And this seems to be like not a huge problem for Jane as far as it's described in the books. Like, it's not like a massive scandal that Jane is gay and has relationships with women. I think that it might make some people frustrated with her, and it certainly is an issue if she can't have an heir, right? Like, if you're a ruler, you need an heir, and so you need to have sex with the opposite sex. I mean, it's kind of comparable to when King Renly in Game of Thrones is married to Marjorie Tyrell, but he's gay and he's in a relationship with Loras Tyrell. And so there's these conversations between Renly and Marjorie and Loras where it's like, well, you need an heir, so how about you have sex with Marjorie just to father a son, but you can continue to secretly be lovers with Loras on the side. And so it's this really sort of awkward personal and political issue that comes up. And I mean, also it's comparable, of course, to Laenor Velaryon, who was Rhaenyra's husband, and Laenor was gay, and so they tried to have children together, but they couldn't. So that was a whole issue, and it did seem to be not a huge problem that Laenor was gay. Like, it wasn't like a huge scandal. Like, no one said, it's bad that Laenor's gay. It was something that had to be kept secret, and that was obviously really painful and difficult and complicated. I don't know. I guess I'm just speculating, like, what are the broader potential consequences if it was that Rhaenyra and Mysaria, like, continued to be lovers or something. And, we don't know if that might happen. I mean, maybe this was just sort of a one-off kiss. Maybe this is leading to something more. Who knows? I mean, something else that could be an issue politically is that Mysaria is a foreigner. Like, in the books, she's from Lys. In the Game of Thrones show, I think on the official website, I think in out-of-universe material, I think they've said that Mysaria is Yeetish. No, yeah, it was in one of the scripts. In one of the scripts for Hot D, they said that Mysaria was from Yeeti, which is in the Far East. And, like, in the books, there are times when people are prejudiced against foreigners. There's lots of examples when people have been suffered prejudice for being foreign. And I think, like, the idea that, Queen Rhaenyra is being manipulated by this foreign woman, like, that is a narrative that could be used against Rhaenyra. That kind of prejudice wouldn't be the first time that happened. So yeah, I don't know. An intimate relationship between Rhaenyra and Mysaria could be politically complicated. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see where that leads. And yeah, this isn't mentioned in the books. There's no mention of a connection between Mysaria and Rhaenyra romantically. But I mean, there's lots of room for things like that to happen because the books are so brief and they have all of this unreliable narration built into them. Thank you, Nate the Noble, who says, so is Aemond removing Criston as Hand because he wants him out of the picture? Did he send him ahead to Harrenhal to tie up a loose end? Cole is the guy who has the most idea of what Aemond did at Rook's Rest. They don't appear to be buds anymore. Yeah, it's really interesting that Aemond sent Criston away when Criston was saying, don't send me away because I don't have a big enough army. But Aemond sent him away anyway, and I agree that might be part of Aemond's thinking. Maybe Aemond is worried that Criston might know that Aemond burned Aegon. I mean, how could he not? Like, that happened in the sky very visibly to, like, Criston's entire army. Surely Criston saw or has heard that Aemond betrayed Aegon. And Criston so far has been not telling Alicent, but, what if Criston told? Maybe Aemond knows or suspects that Criston and Alicent are having sex and have an intimate relationship. Maybe Aemond is worried that Criston will tell Alicent the truth. So yeah, you're right. I think that is a plausible reason why Aemond may have sent Criston away. I mean, I think Aemond is being sort of cold and calculating here. I mean, maybe Aemond is just thinking, look, Criston is a tool, and I'm going to use him to his fullest extent. And, I mean, Criston clearly is not very politically smart, so it does make sense to remove him as Hand of the King, just for that reason alone. He's not very competent as Hand of the King. The only thing that Criston is good at is fighting and leading an army, so I guess it makes sense from, like, a cold, calculating, pragmatic position to just send Criston to fight, because that's what he's good at. It doesn't necessarily have to be, like, a personal issue. But, yeah, this does seem to be a bit of a breakdown of their friendship. Thanks for the super chat from Jazz, who says that Rhaenyra and Alicent wanted to girl bone. Why are we surprised? Yeah, there was that subtext, at least in interviews, that young Rhaenyra and young Alicent had some kind of romantic undertone in their friendship, perhaps, which does make it less surprising that Rhaenyra and Mysaria are making out. What is next? So we talked about the little propaganda campaign, and then we had Rhaenyra slapping Bartimaeus Celtigar, which is not a smart thing to do, I don't think. Like, Bartimaeus is a lord, and he is one of Rhaenyra's counselors, and she is upsetting him by smacking him in the face. I don't know if Bartimaeus deserved that, but I mean, I think that Alfred Broom was more deserving of a slap than Bartimaeus is. Alfred much more directly criticized Rhaenyra publicly, much worse than Bartimaeus ever did. So I think this might be unfortunate, this slap of Bartimaeus. And as Jace says, like, people saw this, people talk about this. This kind of undermines the unity of the Blacks' unified front. So I think it was not a good decision to slap Bartimaeus. But, you know, this is Rhaenyra's frustration. She feels like she's being disrespected because she's a woman. And if only she was a man, if only she had a sword, if only she could fight, then maybe these people would fear her and would respect her more, is what she's thinking. So she feels really guilty about Stefan's death. And she questions this whole idea of non-Targaryens riding dragons. But Mysaria is encouraging, and she says that she's setting up this potential riot of the common people against the Greens. So we see that the common people don't have enough food, while there are these whole truckloads of sheep being taken to the dragons. So I guess that's going to Vhagar and to Helena's dragon Dreamfire, while Aegon's dragon Sunfire is apparently still at Rook's Rest in a sort of unknown condition. So yeah, the common people are understandably frustrated that the lizards are getting food, but the humans aren't. And so Ulf starts shouting for meat. Remember that Hugh said that Meleys is just meat, and the common people called for meat last episode. So it's dangerous when the people are out for blood like this. There's a violence inherent in the word meat, I feel. They're not just calling for bread, you know? Like, they're not just calling for food, they're calling for meat. And I think there's a bit of a threat inherent in the word meat. So yeah, it does seem as though Diana and Sylvie's propaganda and gossip campaign is working, and Ulf is becoming an unknowing participant in that campaign. I suppose it's possible that Ulf might have had a conversation with Sylvie and Diana, and maybe Ulf is knowingly participating in this campaign as opposed to unknowingly. Like, maybe they told him, hey, Ulf, go out and shout for meat, stir up the people, because Ulf is loyal to Rhaenyra, apparently. So maybe he is part of the plan. And so that helps stir up the riot. So Aemond complains that it's unfair that the common people are blaming him for the lack of food when it is Corlys Velarion's blockade that is stopping the food. It would be nice to acknowledge that, like, people are almost starving in King's Landing because of Corlys's blockade. I wonder if Corlys feels any guilt about that. And Rhaenyra might feel some guilt about that. Like, it's kind of funny that Rhaenyra is delivering food on boats via bloody Uber Eats. She's delivering that food at the same time that her blockade is blocking food. She could have just taken down the blockade if she really just wanted to feed the people. So there is something dishonest about this propaganda campaign, I think. So Larys decides to try and convince Aemond to make him Hand of the King. Larys is using this war to try and gain power. And so he suggests that, oh, you need a Hand of the King. You need someone who's subtle like me. So he's clearly angling to be Hand. And this is how Larys became Master of Whisperers with Aegon, right? Like, Larys came up to Aegon and said, oh, you sure need someone to look after the Whispers. I'm pretty good at rumors. So he's trying the same move with Aemond, and this time it doesn't work. Aemond is different to Aegon. Aemond is not as suggestible as Aegon. And so Aemond says, no, you toad, I'm not going to make you Hand of the King. I'm going to make Otto Hand of the King, because I know that Otto is loyal. And I think that, the subtext there is that Aemond is suggesting that Larys is not loyal to their family. I think Aemond is right to suspect Larys. We don't know if Larys... I think it's quite clear that Larys doesn't really, love Aegon and Aemond and the Targaryens and the Hightowers. I think Larys is more out for his own power and his own thrills. So, yeah, I think Aemond makes the right move by not making Larys Hand. Although I do wonder if Aemond even was going to make Otto Hand until Larys brought up the idea of who the Hand of the King is. Because like I said, if Aemond had been intending to make Otto Hand, why not remove Criston from being Hand? Why not take Criston's hand chain before sending him off to war. It would be really funny if Otto became Hand of the King, but Kristen, off in the Riverlands, still thought that he was Hand as well. That would be funny. Yeah, so Aemond rebuffs Larys, and I think that's why Larys then goes and talks to Aegon. Larys is like, well, okay, if the Regent Aemond is not going to listen to me and is not going to empower me, then I've got to align with Aegon, and I've got to try and use him instead. So then Orwyle comes in, the Grand Maester, and he says, hey, good news, King Aegon is getting better. He's actually talking again. He's conscious again. Maybe the king will survive. And Aemond is like, oh, what happy news. Because, of course, Aemond, like, part of Aemond is probably hoping that Aegon doesn't become conscious again, hoping that his brother dies, because if Aegon dies, Aemond will become king, and no one will find out about Aemond's betrayal of Aegon. So Orwyle removes some of those poultices from Aegon's body. Back in Season 1, Orwyle was a big fan of herbal poultices, and that seems to be what helped keep Viserys alive for a long time. So Orwyle does seem to be a skilled healer, and that has helped Aegon survive, which is great. Maybe. I'm not sure if Aegon is very happy to be alive. In the books, it says that Aegon is in so much pain that he wishes that he's dead. So it's a really horrific condition that Aegon is in. And Aemond comes and, like, presses on Aegon's burns. He, like, causes pain to his brother, and he intimidates his brother, and is saying, what do you remember? You challenged Meleys, it was foolish. So Aemond is basically telling Aegon, hey, don't tell anyone that I burned you at Rook's Rest. Just say that Meleys did it to you and you're an idiot. And then Aemond leaves his council ball on Aegon's body. And I think that this angle, like, see that, like, circle on the ball? I think that the ball looks like an eye. I think that this symbolically represents Aemond's one eye watching Aegon. Aemond is saying, I've got my eye on you, brother. So I think there's definitely a threat there. But again, like, if Aemond wanted to kill Aegon, I feel like he probably could. If Aemond wanted to just come and suffocate Aegon with a pillow, I think he could. I think Aemond is choosing not to murder his brother, because that's a evil act, a line that he won't cross, you know? But Aemond does tell Orwyle, my brother has a long recovery ahead of him, make sure that he rests comfortably. So I think that Aemond is telling Orwyle, hey, drug my brother, like, fill him up with opium, fill him up with milk of the poppy, and don't let him get better too quickly because I want to keep him weak. And this parallels the condition of Viserys in Season 1, when Rhaenyra and Daemon accused Alicent of keeping Viserys weak and keeping Viserys drugged with the milk of the poppy so that Alicent and Otto could rule without Viserys stopping them. So I think it's a similar situation. It's kind of funny how Aegon is paralleling his father, King Viserys, in so many ways. They are alike in some ways and very different in other ways. So then we are in the Vale, near the Eyrie. This is where Rhaena Targaryen is, along with young Joffrey Velaryon and Aegon and Viserys. Here is the family tree, if you're a little bit confused by who all of these people are. This is Joffrey Velaryon. He's the youngest son of Rhaenyra and Harwin, while Aegon the Younger and Viserys are the children of Rhaenyra and Daemon. And so Rhaenyra has sent her 3 youngest children to the Vale for safekeeping, and now the plan is that Aegon and Viserys will go on to Pentos, where hopefully they will be safe from the war. And of course, Rhaena Targaryen is the daughter of Daemon Targaryen and Laena Velaryon. And Rhaena has always been frustrated that she doesn't have a dragon. So Rhaena and Joffrey commiserate. I think it's quite cute how these two find a similarity. I mean, they are half siblings because they are both... no, sorry, they're not half siblings. They are cousins, I suppose. And Rhaena's saying that, well, we can't all be dragon riders. We can't all fight in the war. We can't all be cool people because some people we've just got to sit out and we can't join in. Because both Rhaena and Joffrey can't fight in this war. In the books, Joffrey is a bit older, I think, and Joffrey is a bit fiery in the books. Joffrey wants to fight in the war. And Joffrey, at this point in the books, can ride Tyraxes. I think in Hot D, Tyraxes, the little dragon of Joffrey, is too young to fly. But in the books, he is a dragon rider, and he is keen to join the war, and Rhaenyra really has to convince Joffrey not to. Rhaenyra tells Joffrey, oh, you're going to defend the Vale, and that's why you need to be at the Vale. So Joffrey's like, okay, I will defend the Vale, even though he's this tiny kid with a tiny dragon. So, Rhaena and Joffrey are trying to come to terms with sitting in safety and peace when they can't help their family. When they find all these burned sheep. And then Jane says that, yeah, there's a big dragon in the Vale. So, yeah, in the books, there's a dragon called Sheepstealer. And so, I'm not going to spoil anything, but I think that it's fair to speculate that it might be the dragon Sheepstealer that is in the Vale, which is interesting. George Martin made a blog post about how Sheepstealer and the Wild Dragons would not be in the Vale or away from Dragonstone. So this is potentially a change from the books. And so we get to see little Stormcloud here. We've seen, like, most of the dragons at this point, but we have not seen all of the dragons. Yeah, so Reggio in Pentos has agreed to host Aegon and Viserys and the little dragon Stormcloud, while Rhaena and Joffrey... Joffrey is going to stay in the Eyrie, and Rhaena's going to go over to Pentos. And Rhaena is not having a fun time. We see Rhaena holding this little dragon toy, because Rhaena wants a dragon, like her twin Baela, like the rest of her family. And so, with all of this talk about this dragon in the Vale, I think this is obviously setting up the possibility that Rhaena might try to claim Sheepstealer. Hopefully it ends better for Rhaena than it did for Stefan. It's really interesting. What are the rules? Why does Seasmoke reject Stefan but accept Adam? Will the dragon in the Vale accept Rhaena? All open questions. And Jane sends 6 good men to protect Rhaena and Aegon and Viserys and Stormcloud on the way to Pentos, which doesn't sound like a lot of men to me for protecting all those princes and dragons, but there you go. So then we see Alan shaving his head. It's really interesting that Alan hides his Valyrian hair, his Valyrian blood, because that sort of hints that he might be Corlys's son, but Alan chooses to hide and sort of deny his connection to Corlys because he's angry and rejected that Corlys doesn't acknowledge him. There's a fun theory in the Game of Thrones books that maybe Varys shaves his head to hide his Valyrian hair. We don't know who Varys' parents are, but some people speculate that Varys might secretly be Valyrian, he might secretly be a Blackfire, he might secretly be a Targaryen. There's all sorts of fun theories. We made a video on Alt-Shift-X about Varys that gets into that theory. There are some pretty cool theories about the Blackfires and Varys. But yeah, Adam keeps saying that, hey, Alan, I think that you should embrace your connection to Corlys. But Alan says that, nah, Corlys is never going to acknowledge us. Corlys is never going to tell people that he's our father. So I just want to reject him. And Adam is like, but you could get so much power and money. You could gain so much for our family. Adam even suggests that Alan might be the Lord of Driftmark. Because last episode, Corlys was trying to figure out who his heir should be. The heir to Driftmark was Luke, but now Luke is dead. And most of Corlys's family is dead. He asked Baela to be the heir to Driftmark, but she refused. So maybe Corlys would consider making Alan the Lord of Driftmark. That's a distinct possibility. Thank you for the super chat from Notloz, who says, I slipped at work and farted when I hit the ground. My co-workers were laughing at me. I was so embarrassed. Any advice? Notloz, I suggest that you go up to your co-workers and you make eye contact, like lock eyes with your co-workers, and then just rip the loudest fart that you possibly can, just to assert dominance, and then walk away. And I think that will resolve your workplace issue. So that was a conversation between Alan and Adam. And I find it so interesting, this dynamic, because like it's similar to Baela and Rhaena, right? Like Baela is more accepted by Daemon and by her family because she has a dragon and she's more respected. Whereas Rhaena is not respected by her family as much because she doesn't have a dragon. And so Rhaena feels all resentful and left out. And I think that's kind of similar how, you know, Adam feels left out because Alan is the one who's getting Corlys's attention. Corlys is inviting Alan to join his ship, whereas Adam says that Corlys ignores him. So I think that's a really similar, you know, second son syndrome type thing. And I think that it's interesting that, Corlys favors Alan, and Alan is the one with the pale Valyrian hair, So maybe Corlys feels more connected to Alan because Alan has that Velaryon feature like Corlys. And so it's kind of ironic and fun. It's a kind of subversion when it is Adam who claims a dragon. So Alan used to be Corlys's favorite, but I wonder if Adam will become Corlys's favorite now that Adam has a dragon. Because surely Corlys will want a dragon rider as his son, So I wonder if the dynamic might shift between Alan and Adam. Rhaenyra is frustrated about the death of Stefan. She's frustrated by the disrespect of her counselors. And Jace says, I heard you hit Lord Celtigar. What's that about? And Rhaenyra says, he's lucky I did not have his tongue, which is a pretty wild thing to say. Pretty wild that Rhaenyra suggests ripping out Bartimaeus Celtigar's tongue. It's a bit closer to book Rhaenyra, actually, isn't it? Because in the books, Rhaenyra and Alicent are both angrier, more violent characters. Whereas in the show, Rhaenyra and Alicent are more inclined towards peace and reconciliation. So I think this is, a bit closer to the books, seeing a bit of anger and violence from Rhaenyra. I mean, remember Rhaenyra's face at the end of Season 1? Like, it really looked as though Rhaenyra was really going to go to war after Luke was murdered by Aemond. And I have been surprised by how restrained Rhaenyra has been for most of this season. So I wonder if these new challenges might spur her towards action. And indeed, at the end of this episode, she flies off on a dragon. So maybe Rhaenyra will express her frustration through fire and blood. Hopefully she doesn't get as violent as Daenerys does at the end of Game of Thrones. And so, again, it's all about gender. She feels that if she was a man with a sword and a shield, then she would be respected. And she feels that as a woman, she's not respected. Because gowns and jewels are not seen as symbols of authority. Jace insists that he respects Rhaenyra, and he wants to work together with his mother. But then when Mysaria turns up and says that, I've done our secret plan, and then Jace looks at them like, what? What's the secret plan? You guys aren't telling me the secret plan? And so then he storms off. So I think it's really unfortunate that Jace is being excluded from this plan, and Jace is like, I have faith in you, why don't you have faith in me, So I think Jace is continuing to feel frustrated at not being fully trusted by Rhaenyra. And, Rhaenyra is also frustrated by everyone wanting her to work with Daemon when Daemon has been a massive pain in the ass. A reminder that we're not doing any spoilers about future events in these live streams, so I'm not going to read your donation messages if you are spoiling future events. So, the common people are overjoyed to find that Rhaenyra has delivered some food to King's Landing using these little boats, and she puts her red dragon on these banners to indicate that it's Rhaenyra, the true queen, Rhaenyra, who's delivering food to the common people. Orwell says that it looks like Aegon might live, and Alicent says, what will he be if he lives? I mean, Rhaenyra's been talking about how, men are valued for their, physical prowess, for their ability to fight, for their physical strength. And so if Aegon is so hurt by what happened at Rook's Rest that he's unable to walk, unable to fight, maybe Aegon won't be respected. I mean, the books are full of characters who aren't physically able to, play the male role. Wyman Manderley is fat. Jaime Lannister has his hand cut off. Tyrion is a dwarf. There's lots of characters who aren't physically capable in some ways, and therefore they suffer prejudice and disrespect. And so Alicent is wondering, what will Aegon's life be like? If he is viewed as a, quote, cripple, how will he be treated? What will his life be like? Orwell says that Alicent's father, Otto, is not responding to their messages. I think it's very funny that Otto has, like, basically caused this war, and now he's left and he's ghosted everyone. Like, Otto really should take responsibility for what's going on. I mean, yes, he was fired by Aegon, but now Aemond wants him to come back as Hand. So, where is Otto? Why isn't he replying? Alicent told Otto to go to Highgarden to get the Tyrells and the Reach Lords in line, and that clearly hasn't happened because the Beesbury's are rebelling. So what the hell is going on in the region? Where is Otto? All good open questions. And so Alicent tells Aegon, I'm sorry. Which is, like, really lovely, and it's also, like, too late. Like, I mean, I suppose Alicent is apologizing for crowning Aegon. I suppose Alicent is apologizing for the terrible position that Aegon is in. And I guess Alicent might be apologizing for not being a better parent to Aegon, because later Alicent feels like she blames herself for how Aegon and Aemond are not very good people. They are unkind, they are violent, they are unwise. And I think Alicent feels guilty. She feels responsible for that. So I think that's part of what she's apologizing for. But I mean, it's really unfortunate that Alicent is apologizing while Aegon is unconscious. I think it would really mean something to Aegon to hear these words from his mother, but tragically, he does not hear, just as Alicent did not hear when Aegon said mummy while Alicent was walking away. So it's really sad stuff. I hope that they will connect while they are both conscious at some point. I think this lovely shot looks a lot like Otto after Otto got fired by Aegon. He was standing at this balcony looking defeated, and now Alicent is in a similar position. Alicent sort of tries to look at Criston, but Criston is not looking, and they sort of fail to make eye contact. The whole relationship between Alicent and Criston is left in a really ambiguous position. Are they still lovers? Do they still respect each other? Alicent feels betrayed that Criston did not support her as regent, so that relationship is fraught. That relationship is dangerous. And then Alicent's brother Gwaine is chatting with Alicent, and he hasn't heard from Otto. And Gwaine says that, well, Alicent, you were always Otto's favorite. So again, there's that sibling rivalry thing coming up again, just like with Adam and Alan, and like with the Hobart and Otto, and like Viserys and Daemon. There's always siblings competing for their parents' affection. And it's interesting that Otto seemed to love Alicent more than Gwaine. I wonder if that's connected to Otto's grief for his dead wife, Allery Florent. Like, we're told that part of the reason why Viserys made Rhaenyra heir is because Rhaenyra represented her mother, Emma, to Viserys. So I wonder if, in some sense, Alicent represents her mother, Allery, to Otto, projecting the mother onto the daughter. And yeah, Gwaine says that Otto is ever resourceful. He will send news when there is news to send. Is Otto up to something? What is Otto doing? Where is Otto? He seemed like he just wanted to leave and not do politics anymore when he got fired by Aegon, but I don't know, maybe Otto's up to something. And Gwaine is seeming kind of shell-shocked. I think Gwaine is traumatized by the horrific battle at Rook's Rest. And I think that's part of why he's being kind of sarcastic and a bit glib and disconnected from Alicent. I think Gwaine and Criston would really appreciate some sympathy from Alicent after the horrors that they've been through. But I think Alicent has no conception of how horrible a battle is. I wonder if at some point Alicent might see a battle, and I wonder if once Alicent sees a battle, she'll be like, oh god, this is how awful it is. This is what I helped contribute to by helping to crown Aegon. Oh boy, I regret everything. Maybe that'll happen at some point. But Alicent asks Gwaine about her son Daeron. So Daeron Targaryen is the third son of Viserys and Alicent. Here's some artwork of Daeron in the middle here. So Daeron is now 16 years old, and we haven't seen Daeron on screen because he's been off in Old Town being the cupbearer for the High Towers. And Alicent asks, what is my son like? She's not getting letters from him so much anymore, and I think she's worried about him. And Gwaine says, you know what? Daeron is a wonderful young man. He is kind. He is smart, he is handsome, he plays the lute as well as fights with swords. So it sounds as though Daeron is really lovely, and I think Alicent is really happy to learn that some of her children are not horrible murderers. But I think Alicent is also kind of heartbroken, because it's like, well, the one child who I didn't raise is the good one. So I think Alicent feels like she's a horrible mother, and she blames herself. But Gwaine, I think very kindly and sensitively says, well, no, you tried your best. I think the reason why Aegon and Aemond are screwed up is because King's Landing is a bad place. It is a less than salubrious environment for the upbringing of young men, he says. And I think that certainly is true, that King's Landing and politics does do horrible things to people, especially while they're growing up. So I think this is a really sort of kind moment from Gwaine to Alicent, and it's really nice to see these siblings achieve some intimacy and some kindness to each other. At the same time that Gwaine, he really does seem shell-shocked, doesn't he? I mean, remember how arrogant and confident Gwaine seemed last time he was in this courtyard before he went to war? Gwaine really seems messed up, and he's really doing this sort of British stiff upper lip, keep calm and carry on and Hail Britannia quite type thing. He's really been through it, and he may face more horrors if he marches to war in the Riverlands. So Criston and Gwaine head off to do more fighting. And I think Alicent is, left in this really uncomfortable, ambiguous space. Powerless. The men go off and do the war, and she has to wait. And it sucks for both the men and the women. So then we go to church. Alicent and Helaena go to the Sept. Hugh pats the dog, Cheese's dog, who we saw earlier. And lovely to see the dog finally getting some pats. And then Hugh punches a random guy and takes his food. So it turns out we are indeed all capable of depravity. Hugh is willing to assault and steal from someone in order to feed his family. What more will Hugh do? What else will people do in this time of need? And so Alicent really wanted this Sept to be a safe space. This is the place where she can be alone and feel connected to her family, and she can contemplate and process her feelings. But last time we saw her here, Rhaenyra held a knife to Alicent, and now Alicent has to flee the Sept because the small folk are attacking. So it's even Alicent's most sacred safe space is being intruded upon, which is really disturbing for her. I wonder how Helaena feels about the Faith of the Seven. Does Helaena believe in the Faith of the Seven? Does Helaena pray? Targaryens tend not to be all that religious. Targaryens tend to be more into their own power and dragon power, as opposed to the Faith of the Seven. So I wonder what Helena's religious feelings are. So they have to flee the Sept because this riot is happening. It seems like maybe staying in the Sept might have been safer than going out into the streets, but the Kingsguard Rickard Thorne insists that they've got to go. So they get caught up in the riot, and it's really dangerous, and Leon Estamont stupidly cuts off some guy's hand, and so the riot gets more violent, and it really looks as though Alicent and Helaena might be torn apart by the mob. It does seem as though Leon Estamont dies, and maybe some of the other Kingsguard die as well, we don't know. Alicent gets a fish to the face, she's called the Queen of Fishes, so the people are furious that the Greens, Aegon, Aemond, Alicent, have failed to feed the people. And it is Rhaenyra who's providing food, and through those food deliveries on those boats. So the people are starting to turn against Alicent. The plan is working. Mysaria and Rhaenyra's plan is working, and it's really interesting that Alicent gets a cut on her arm, just like Rhaenyra gets cut by Alicent on Dragonstone, which is really interesting. There's a parallel cut. Blood has been drawn from both Alicent and Rhaenyra now, so that's a cool parallel. Thanks for the donation from Nuisance, who says, the riot outside the Sept speaks to the idea that subterfuge and information warfare is still conflict. I wonder how this reflects on Ice and Fire characters like Varys. Yeah, there is always this interesting distinction between the warriors who fight in battle and the whisperers and the manipulators like Varys and Larys and Mysaria. So both kinds of conflict continue to be relevant. So speaking of Laris, there's this really interesting conversation between Laris and Aegon, where Laris is sort of revealing his trauma and sort of telling his backstory, and talking about how when he was born, his father thought he was twisted because of his club foot, and blamed Alice Rivers, apparently, for his club foot. And Laris says that, Laris was mocked, and he was looked down upon, and he was pitied, and he was underestimated. And it sucks to be treated that way, but you can use it to your advantage, and you can use your mind. And this is very, very similar to Tyrion Lannister. Remember when Tyrion tells Jon that, you've got to wear it like armor. Whatever your weakness is, whatever the prejudice that is used against you, you've got to take that and use it as your power. So I think Laris is trying to sort of shape Aegon into being like him. Laris is saying, you and me, Aegon, we're in this together. You and me, we are alike. Now that Aegon is burned, now that he is physically disabled, he is like Laris. And obviously that's like a self-serving manipulation. Like Laris wants Aegon to be controlled by Laris. Laris wants to use the king. But, there's also sincerity when Laris is sort of honestly talking about his deepest pain. And that pain seems to drive Laris. He really wants to, I think there's an element of vengeance in Laris. It's a bit like Littlefinger. Like, you sort of get the sense that Littlefinger feels rejected and bullied and disrespected, and that's why Littlefinger wants to sort of make the world suffer, make the world respect him, get revenge on the world. I think there's a similar vibe from Laris here. But it really continues the pattern of villains in this story being sympathetic. I mean, Aegon is a pretty bad, monstrous person, but we also feel for Aegon because he shows his vulnerability. And Laris here is a pretty monstrous person who, burns his own father and brother alive. But he also shows this pain and this vulnerability, which makes it possible to sympathize with him. So there's moral complexity to all these characters, which is wonderful. And it does really make me wonder what the connection between Alice and Laris is, and what the relationship between Laris and Lionel was like. Laris murdered his own father, and now we see that Lionel, saw Laris as this twisted, deformed person who must have been, caused by sorcery. I wonder if Lionel disrespected Laris, and I wonder if Lionel rejected Laris, and I wonder if that's part of why Laris killed Lionel. In a similar way to how Tyrion felt rejected by Tywin. I think there's really similar dynamics there. So Aegon says to Laris, help me. So Aegon is desperate for allies. Aegon is terrified of Aemond. Aegon is worried that Aemond might kill him. So I think Laris is setting himself up as the best friend of the king. Can Aegon rely on Laris? What exactly does Laris want to get out of all of this? Real interesting questions. So then Daemon has this vision at Harrenhal. I like how we see dripping water. So like, this is a vision of Viserys with Aemma and Balon after Emma's death. And so it's presumably like at King's Landing, but Daemon is having a dream of King's Landing at Harrenhal. So we see like the dripping water, which is like the dripping broken roofs of Harrenhal in the rain. And I think that the dripping water also connects to Viserys' tears, because Viserys is crying over Aemma, and so I think that dripping water also connects to the tears. It also reminds me of like Alicent's bath. A lot of the water imagery that's been around Alicent is interesting. I suppose it connects to grief. So Daemon previously felt really guilty that he didn't comfort and support his brother Viserys when Viserys' wife Aemma died. And Viserys exiled Daemon in Season 1, Episode 1, partly because Daemon wasn't supporting Viserys, and Daemon was instead mocking Viserys and Viserys' stillborn son Balon. So I think this dream is about Daemon trying to make up for his failures and confront his failures, and he says, I'm sorry. And I think this is potentially a turning point for Daemon. Daemon has like never apologized before. Like in Season 2, Episode 2, with Rhaenyra, Daemon refused to acknowledge his failings, refused to acknowledge that he had hurt people and made bad decisions. But here Daemon is facing a failure, and he's trying to heal, and he's trying to make up for it. And I think that's really beautiful, and I wonder if this might lead Daemon to be a better person. It's also wonderful to see Paddy Considine back playing Viserys. George R. R. Martin said that Paddy Considine's performance and the character of Viserys in Hot D is way better than Viserys in the books. And I agree. So yeah, Daemon has this amazing dream, and then he immediately wakes up and finds from Simon that Lord Grover Tully is dead. So Lord Grover Tully was the old, weak, dying man who was the Lord Paramount of the Riverlands. And previously, Daemon was really rude, telling Oscar, "Oh, you should kill your grandfather, Grover." And he had no sympathy. But now, Daemon finds out that Grover is dead, and it sort of connects in his head, you know, the old dying Grover with old dying Daemon. And it seems as though Daemon almost has a bit of sympathy when he starts crying. I mean, he's crying about Viserys, but I think it sort of connects it to Grover as well, you know? Like, maybe this is the beginning of Daemon actually giving a shit about other people, you know? And of course, this is also a political opportunity. Now that Grover is dead, the Tullys might actually start asserting themselves and might actually lead the Riverlands. So this is an opportunity for Daemon to talk to Oscar and potentially get the Tullys and the rest of the Riverlands on Daemon's side. Either that, or the Greens might get the Riverlands on their side, which would be a problem. So, yeah, and also the other element is that apparently Alice Rivers was quote-unquote healing Grover when Grover died. So it seems as though Alice has murdered Grover, which is really interesting because Alice was like telling Daemon, you shouldn't murder innocent people, but here Alice is murdering Grover. So it's like, what is Alice's game here? Does Alice really want Daemon to succeed? Why does Alice want Daemon to succeed? Does she have some mystical destiny in mind, or does she think that Daemon might actually become a good person and a good ruler? All really interesting questions. Thanks for the super chat from Whitney, who says, do you think Daemon is becoming a green seer? It's no longer weird dreams, but vivid memories. Yeah, I mean, you don't need to be a green seer to have mystical visions and dreams. And I think that it may be Alice who is causing Daemon to have the dreams, and also his weirwood bed could be influencing it. So I think there's lots of reasons why Daemon might have visions that don't necessarily mean that he's a green seer. And also, like, green seers seem to need to be children of the forest or people with the blood of the first men, like the Starks have the blood of the first men, Jojen Reed has the blood of the first men, the Blackwoods and Bloodraven have the blood of the first men. So I think that's why those people are capable of being green seers. I don't think Daemon is a green seer per se. Then we go to Adam, and Adam gets claimed by Seasmoke. We've already talked about this a bit. I think it's hilarious that Adam runs away from Seasmoke. I think it connects to what Alice said earlier about the people who don't want power might be the people who deserve it. Although, I mean, Adam is the more ambitious of compared to Alan. Adam does seem to want some wealth and some social standing. So I'm really curious, what will Adam do with this dragon? Adam is suddenly one of the more powerful people in the world. From a humble shipwright to one of the most powerful people in the world, with one of the most powerful military assets in the world. I mean, Seasmoke is a relatively large dragon, I think. Not as large as Vhagar. Not as large as Caraxes. Possibly around the same size as Cyrax, I would think. So sort of a large, medium dragon size, and makes Adam very powerful. And again, it's very curious because Adam, as far as we know, doesn't have any Targaryen blood. So how can Adam be a dragon rider if he doesn't have Targaryen blood? We don't know who Adam's mother is, so maybe she was a dragon seed. And maybe you actually don't need to be a Targaryen to ride a dragon. Maybe Valerians and Valyrians, and maybe anyone can ride a dragon. Who knows? This is a mystery in the books, as well as in Hot D. Apparently, the small folk carried Rhaenyra's red dragon banners around in King's Landing, so it was quite clever to, like, give them physical banners so that they could really, like, side with Rhaenyra against the Greens. That's kind of cool. Your banners were carried into the city. So yeah, this is a great success for Mysaria and Rhaenyra's plan to use the small folk against the Greens. Meanwhile, Rhaenyra is feeling defeated. She says, I don't think we can win this war. Jace questions my capabilities. Everyone only respects Daemon. So again, like, Rhaenyra's feeling like she's being rejected for being a woman. I mean, like Rhaenys said, The men would rather burn the realm to the ground than accept a woman as queen, and that is seeming kind of true, similar to Alicent's frustrations being rejected. And then we get some really interesting talk about Rhaenyra and Daemon's relationship, where Rhaenyra says that Daemon is everything I wanted to be. Rhaenyra wanted to be carefree and dangerous and a man. And it's really interesting, does Rhaenyra want to be a man because that's some, deeply held gender thing for her? Or is it because she lives in a world where men have all the power and she feels suffocated by the female gender role and that's what she's fighting against? I think that's a really interesting question. But certainly since season 1, Rhaenyra has always wanted to fly around on a dragon, be free, be powerful. She hasn't wanted to be stuck in a political role. And so Daemon seems as though he has all that freedom, because Daemon throughout the whole series has been basically doing what he wants without any consequences and flying around and occasionally declaring himself heir and warring in the Stepstones and being lovers with Mysaria, marrying Laena, leaving Pentos. He's living the exact kind of life that Rhaenyra would like to be living. Daemon has been miserable the entire time, but it seems as though that's what Rhaenyra would like. And conversely, Daemon wishes he was Rhaenyra, because Rhaenyra was loved by Viserys and was Viserys' heir, and he's loved, and so it's so interesting that do Rhaenyra and Daemon really love each other, or do they just want to be each other? It's that sort of narcissistic, incestuous thing. Are they loving each other, or are they loving themselves? Are they wanting to be each other? Is a really fascinating question. Is Rhaenyra and Daemon's love real, or is it just desire for each other's lives? And Rhaenyra says that Daemon wanted to possess Rhaenyra, but did not want to be possessed by Rhaenyra. And I think there's truth in that as well. Daemon sort of refuses to be subject to someone else's will. He's never seemed to respect the desires of his partners, whereas Rhaenyra has had to be subject to Daemon's whims, so... she's basically feeling that this is a really shitty position that she's in. Her relationship with Daemon is really shitty, and she doesn't want to have to rely on him. And so, without Daemon off in the Riverlands, for all she knows, Daemon is planning to betray her and march against her. So she feels like she can't win. Stefan died, so the whole Dragon Seeds plan seems to be a failure. She still hasn't got a bloody army. I mean, supposedly the Starks and the Vale are coming with an army to support her, but they're still a while away. So she seems to be in an impossible position. And so it's really lovely and meaningful when Mysaria says, well, I believe in you. And just that personal connection is really inspiring. So we already talked about this bit, how Mysaria tells her sort of traumatic backstory. Mysaria says that she was raped by her own father. And her father scarred her neck, and her father impregnated her. And then her father ended Mysaria's pregnancy and scarred her body, and she's now unable to have children. So it sounds as though Mysaria's reproductive system was physically damaged by her own father. So it's this incredibly harrowing, grim, upsetting trauma that Mysaria was subjected to. And after that, she resolved that she would not trust anyone ever. She would never trust anyone, and she would protect herself. And she would do what she had to do to survive. And so she became a spy master. And that's very similar to Varys's backstory. Varys was castrated, Varys was left for dead, but Varys found a way to survive using whispers and rumors, which is an interesting parallel. Because Rhaenyra asked in a previous episode, where did you get that scar? And so now Mysaria is telling that story. So Mysaria is saying that, I thought this world was so cold and cruel, but I'm seeing that you actually are a good person. You actually do see me as an equal. You actually do show me some respect. And therefore I will serve you and I will believe in you. So it's a really beautiful moment of, faith and trust. And maybe that's what Rhaenyra needs to keep fighting this war. They feel trusting and safe with each other in a way that they haven't felt with anyone else in a long time. And so I think that sense of trust and intimacy and belief is a part of what brings them together. And then they realize, oh, hang on, we're all so sexually attracted to each other. And so they start making out, and they really get into it until Laurent Marbrand rudely interrupts. So yeah, really interesting. I was not expecting this to happen, but Mysaria and Rhaenyra sharing like a romantic connection or a sexual connection is super intriguing. I was always sort of suspicious that Mysaria might have ulterior motives, that she might not be truly loyal to Rhaenyra, but I think at this point it really does seem like Mysaria really does believe in Rhaenyra and really does hope that she'll be good for the common people and really believes that she will be good to her and will protect her. I wonder, what could that relationship be like in the future? Are they going to have to keep it secret? Could they publicly be lovers? It would not be totally I mean, lots of Targaryen kings have paramours and, like, lovers, but as a female, Rhaenyra's relationships might be seen differently. It'd be really interesting to see how this is handled and what this relationship will be going ahead. Thanks for the donation from Jess K, who says that perhaps part of the envy that Rhaenyra feels of Daemon is that he can openly be involved with women, while she cannot be. Yeah, I mean, Daemon didn't have any well, I mean, he had consequences when he declared himself heir, but Daemon as a man, is able to take lovers and paramours, and that's not an issue for him. But will Rhaenyra get blowback if she takes a lover? Interesting question. And yeah, like in Westeros, like there is some prejudice against homosexuality, especially from like the Faith of the Seven. Although there's also this idea of Targaryen exceptionalism. Like Targaryen exceptionalism argues that Targaryens are better and different than other people, and that's why they're allowed to practice incest. So if the Targaryens are allowed to do incest, I'm pretty sure they'll get away with Rhaenyra kissing girls if she wants to. But yeah, intriguing turn of events. And then Laurent comes in and says, hey, Sea Smoke has a rider, which is like a crazy thing to happen. And Rhaenyra immediately assumes that the Greens, Aegon and Aemond, and one of them must have taken the dragon somehow. So this is like a huge threat, potentially. For all they know, Sea Smoke is about to burn Driftmark, for all they know. And also, it's a big deal because that's Laenor's dragon, so Rhaenyra's probably thinking, oh my god, is Laenor still alive? Would Laenor have to die for Sea Smoke to be claimed? And Laurent says, should I summon your council? And so Rhaenyra's like, should I talk to the men who have just been undermining me this entire season? And she decides, no, you know what? Mysaria believes in me. Mysaria says that I look good holding a sword, so I'm going to fly out and I'm going to deal with this myself. Which, is a cool thing to do. I wish that Rhaenyra talked to Jace, though. Because Jace sees Rhaenyra leave on her dragon, and this is like the third time that Rhaenyra has flown off on her dragon and not told anyone what she's doing or what the plan is. It's like, what is Jace meant to do? Just sit there and wait and wonder if his mother is dead or alive? It's an awful position to put Jace in. But it is exciting to see Rhaenyra going out and doing something on her dragon. And it will be fascinating to see her confront Adam and Sea Smoke. So I think that's pretty much everything that's happened. I will now try to answer as many of your questions and donations as I can. I will not be able to answer all of them, but I will do my best to answer as many as I can. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe. And if you feel like listening to a 22-hour-long video about Jon Snow made by Glidus and AltShiftX, you can sign up to Nebula and watch 61 hours of exclusive Dragon videos at nebula.tv/AltShiftX. So, what else haven't we talked about? So we talked about Aegon's condition. We talked about the dragon in the Vale and how that might be a change from the books. We talked about how Alan might potentially be a candidate to rule Driftmark, but it's now Adam who has the dragon. We've talked about the war in the Reach, and now House Beesbury is fighting the Hightowers because the Greens killed Lyman Beesbury. We talked about Gwen's trauma. We talked about Alicent's cut, paralleling Rhaenyra's cut. We talked about how Lionel apparently blamed Alice for Larys's clubfoot. I don't believe that Alice actually did a spell to give Larys a clubfoot. I don't see why that would happen. But I do think it's intriguing to think that Lionel might have disliked Alice, and yet Alice is still there and Lionel is not. And I'm so fascinated by what the relationship might be between Laris and Alice. Are they working together? Do they both have magic powers? Lots of possibilities. We talked about how Daemon is confronting his failures to support his brother Viserys. We talked about how Rhaenyra sort of wants to be Daemon, and Daemon wants to be Rhaenyra, which contributes to this twisted, complex niece-uncle marriage. We talked about Mysaria and Rhaenyra's kiss. Maybe Mysaria just likes blondes. Cool, yeah, alright, so let's try and answer some questions. Thanks for the donation from Jess K, who says, I'm on my second watch through of the fake Jon Snow mega video. It's what gets me through the week, waiting for new Hot D episodes. Yeah, glad you're enjoying the fake Jon Snow. Yeah, I mean, my evil half-grunkle Alt-Shift-X does not have quite the same professionalism or commitment to brevity that Alt-Shift-X has. But I'm glad that people are enjoying the fake Jon Snow, and y'all can watch it at nebula.tv/AltSwiftX by signing up to Nebula. Steven says, hey Alt, long time, first time. Is there any connection between Valyrian Dreamers and Westerosi Greenseers? That is a great question, Steven. Because, yeah, Greenseers use the magic of the Old Gods and the Weirwoods to have mystical visions. And Targaryens have mystical visions that seem connected to their dragons, like Daenerys the Dreamer has that dream of the Doom. And so you can speculate, like, is that the same kind of magic, or is that different kind of magic? Is, like, fire dragon magic a different flavor of magic compared to Old Gods magic? There's also other kinds of magic, like glass candles, which seem to be connected to, like, blood magic, and then there's, like, the sort of White Walker magic. Is that the same as Old Gods magic, or is that something else? There's shadow binding magic, there's water mages from the Rhoyne. There's lots of different flavors of magic, and George Martin has said that he's never gonna, like, explain the rules of the magic system. George Martin likes using magic sparingly, he likes magic being mysterious, he likes magic having a cost. Magic causes as many problems as it solves. You can't just wave a magic wand and all of your problems go away. So I don't think there's ever clear-cut answers, but I do think it's a really interesting idea that maybe the way that Greenseers and wargs control animals through warging, maybe that's like the same kind of magic that Targaryens use to control dragons. Like, it seems different in some ways, but I mean, it's more than just Valyrian commands. The dragons seem to feel the emotions of their riders, which is just like how wargs feel the emotions of their animals, like the Starks and the direwolves. So yeah, maybe it is a connected kind of magic. It also seems like the way that the White Walkers control the zombies might also be a similar kind of magic. Maybe that also is similar to skin changing and warging. And of course, you know, the White Walkers seem to have come from Old Gods magic, and there's also some interesting speculation that the dragons and the bond with the dragons was created through some kind of sacrifice that may have involved the Old Gods and the Weirwoods and Nissa and the Children of the Forest and the Bloodstone Emperor, and there's a lot of very like vague and mysterious ancient myth that might interconnect these magics. And I do like the idea that creating the dragon bond might have been this sacrifice and this sin that was stealing power from the gods that might have been connected to the creation of the White Walkers and the long night as, like, you know, the consequence of the terrible sacrifice that made the dragon bond. It's very, very speculative, but I think there's a lot of interesting ideas there. Thank you, Mihalio, who says, do you feel like Rhaenyra started with Sea Smoke as a test whether Laenor was still alive? I don't think she did. Like, I don't think Rhaenyra was going, well, if Steffon dies, that proves that Laenor is still alive, and if Steffon succeeds in claiming Sea Smoke, that proves that Laenor is dead. I don't think that's what she was doing. Like, she was horrified by the death of Steffon. But yeah, I feel like it might have been more logical for her to try to have Vermithor or Silverwing claimed, because they definitely don't have a living rider, so maybe they'd be more likely to accept a rider, you know? But that's not what she did. Koblack says, Cyrax versus Sea Smoke. Who's older and has more war experience? Sea Smoke has experience of war in the Stepstones. Laenor flew Sea Smoke in the Stepstones, and so Sea Smoke is battle hardened, whereas Cyrax has never been in a war. Cyrax was first written by Rhaenyra. So, I imagine that Sea Smoke might be a more formidable dragon than Cyrax. Blastwave says, what's your favorite and least favorite change from Fire and Blood so far? I think that making Rhaenyra and Alicent the same age and like childhood friends was a good change. I think that it really deepened the relationship between Rhaenyra and Alicent and made their rivalry a lot more meaningful. Whereas in the books, Alicent was just like the older stepmother and they didn't have that intimate friendship. So it wasn't as much of a betrayal when they ended up on opposite sides. So I think that was a cool change. I think that my least favorite change might be Alicent misunderstanding Viserys' last words and thinking that he was talking about her son Aegon when he was actually talking about Aegon the Conqueror. Like, to me, that's a little bit too goofy. It's a little bit too farcical. It's a little bit too much like, whoa, this whole war was all just a silly misunderstanding. And you know, like, the war was going to happen even if Alicent didn't misunderstand Viserys because it was more Otto's plan and he was going to crown Aegon anyway. But still, I don't love that change. I will say that if it is that Rhaena claims a dragon in the Vale, which seems to be what they are setting up, like that would be unfortunate because it would go against some stuff in the book that is really cool. There's a lot of fan favorite book stuff that it looks as though the show might be going against. So we'll see how that pans out. Thank you, Panelflow, who says, what was your original reaction to the Game of Thrones show going away from the books before you started talking about GOT on your channel? Do you think they were right to do it in some places? When did you realize it was only going to get further and further away? Yeah, I mean, the Game of Thrones show was pretty faithful to the books until the end of Season 4 and the start of Season 5. And I would say that like Season 6 is when they were like really off the books. And yeah, I mean, I increasingly felt like the show was diverging and the show was getting worse from, you know, Season 5, 6, 7. And yeah, that was frustrating. Were any of those changes right? I mean, there's a lot of stuff in like Book 4 and Book 5 that are slow. Like, you know, Brienne spends a lot of chapters walking around the Riverlands. Daenerys spends a lot of time just being frustrated in Meereen by the slavers. There's a lot of slow stuff that I think makes sense to like shorten and consolidate and speed up. But I think that they not only sped things up, they also just went against like the central themes of the books in a lot of ways, and they really threw the baby out with the bathwater. And of course, part of the problem with Game of Thrones was that they didn't have the Winds of Winter and they didn't have A Dream of Spring, so it was not an easy thing to adapt books that have not yet been written, right? So, you know, it was not an easy thing, but I certainly was frustrated with Game of Thrones from like Season 5 onwards. And of course, even the earlier seasons had some questionable changes as well. Thank you, Tesla Coil, who says, if Daemon spends another 2 episodes in Harrenhal, it feels like character assassination. His role in the show so far feels clumsy. I agree that Daemon's Harrenhal plot has been slow. I think that it is like needed, though. Like, it would be boring if he just continues to be a loose cannon and continues to be chaotic, continues to be a pain in the ass. We need character growth, we need character change, and I think that this like self-examination at Harrenhal is a good opportunity to do that. But I certainly do hope that he leaves Harrenhal at some time soon, and I hope that he does something before this season ends. Thank you, Nuisance, who says, you've mentioned the casting of Harwin not being the most convincing. You know who that actor would have been perfect casting for? Renly. It would have made his campaign for the throne more believable. Yeah, I mean, Harwin was meant to be like the strongest knight in Westeros, and I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of that sort of physically imposing thing. I mean, sure, he looks like a strong knight or whatever, but it would have been nice to see a bit more of that breakbones energy from Harwin. Sahaj says, this season is more likely to end with yet another... Well, yeah, we don't want to spoil anything. And another observation is the impeccable dialogue writing compared to the last 3 seasons of GOT. Yeah, I think that the writing is a lot of fun. Young Will says, who would Corlys want to sit on his driftwood throne, Adam or Alan? One rides a dragon, and the other a valued seafarer. That's a great question. I mean, Baylor said last episode that Driftmark should go to salt and sea, not to fire and blood. So if Adam is riding a dragon, he is fire and blood. Whereas Alan is more of an experienced sailor. He is salt and sea. So maybe it would make sense to make Alan Corlys's heir and not Adam. I mean, of course, it's meant to be the older person who gets the dragon. And Adam is the older of the two brothers, at least in the books. So it would make more sense for Adam to be the heir, not Alan, but we'll see how that pans out. Thanks for the super chat from Jeffrey, who says, Lord Strong mentioned Alice this episode, so is he aware that she currently exists or not? I think that Larys must know that Alice exists. Like, the fact that he's talking about this sorceress who was there, and the fact that Larys in the previous episode said, oh, Daemon's going to be driven mad by dreams and visions and the curse. Like, I think that Larys knows that Alice exists. But it does raise questions, like when Larys had that fire at Harrenhal to kill Harwin and Lionel, when he sent his firebugs to Harrenhal, like, was Alice involved in that in any way? Like, when Larys started that fire, did he warn Alice that, hey, I'm doing a fire? Did Alice cooperate with that? I'm very curious about the Alice-Larys relationship. Whitney says, do you think Rhaenyra has completely given up on Daemon? And has Mysaria caught on to that and is using that to her advantage? Yeah, I mean, Rhaenyra kind of basically has said that, like, well, I just have to assume that Daemon won't help me because he's not replying to my messages. He seems to want to take my throne. I just cannot rely on him. So yeah, I think to a large extent, Rhaenyra has given up on Daemon. And yeah, I mean, Mysaria is definitely stepping into Daemon's place here, isn't she? I don't know if that's necessarily a calculating thing. I tend to believe that Mysaria is being sincere when she says, I believe in you. And I think her attraction to Rhaenyra is sincere. So, yeah, I mean, Mysaria is a calculating person, but I think that she is being sincere. Thanks for the donation from Hig, who says, have you heard of Nettlenan theory? I have not. Thank you, Smoking Monkey, who says, is it possible that Alice is one of the green men from the Isle of Faces? It's right there, and would explain a lot of her knowledge and abilities. I think that is a great theory, Smoking Monkey. So yeah, the Isle of Faces is a very magical, sacred island that is on the lake next to Harrenhal, and the Isle of Faces is apparently guarded by green men who are mysterious, magical old gods figures that we don't know what they are or what they look like, and anyone who tries to go to the island is sent away from the island by winds and by ravens. The magic of the old gods protects this island. And supposedly Howland Reed visited the Isle of Faces at some point in the time of the tourney of Harrenhal, which is interesting. But yeah, I mean, if green men are like powerful magical people, maybe green men could disguise themselves. Because, I mean, green men apparently have antlers and stuff. But maybe a green man could disguise themselves as Alice Rivers, and maybe that would explain Alice Rivers. I mean, the green men probably do live for hundreds of years, because they, are living on this tiny island, and they apparently never leave. So, like, yeah, maybe Alice is an ancient green man. We don't know what the green men are. Some people speculate that the green men might be, like, half Child of the Forest, half human, created at the time of the Pact, when the humans stopped fighting the Children of the Forest. Lots of interesting possibilities. Thank you, Turnip Knight, who says, is Larys implying that Alice is responsible for his clubfoot? It sounds like Lionel blamed Alice for Larys's clubfoot, but I don't know if Larys believes that Alice is responsible. I don't see why Alice would do a magic spell to give Larys a clubfoot. Birth defects happen. I don't think it needs to be sorcery, and I think that there is this subtext of, like, sometimes, women are blamed, and, like, sorceress people and, people who are victims of prejudice are blamed for birth defects and whatever when it's not their fault. I mean, Maegor blames women for his failures to reproduce, and there's a history of that. So Yeah, I don't think Alice is responsible for Laris's clubfoot. Thank you, Darth Schwiftius, who says, the news of Grover's death felt like Daemon's reward for finally comforting Viserys, like he was supposed to. Yeah, I agree. I agree. This is what Alice wanted. I think Alice wanted Daemon to confront his past and to actually achieve some growth and to actually acknowledge his failings and to take a step forward. And maybe now that Viserys has sort of Daemon has confronted his painful past with Daemon, maybe now Daemon can change. And so I think that's why Alice was saying, hey, Daemon, stay for 3 more days and then everything will be better. So I think she was saying, Daemon, you need 3 days more of therapy, 3 days more of ayahuasca trips, and then it'll all be going better. Because then she kills Grover as like a reward, as a gold star for persisting with his therapy. So Daemon now has a political opportunity to lead the Riverlands now that the Tullys might actually do something now that Oscar is the Lord Paramount. And yeah, maybe Alice now believes that Daemon is ready to do that responsibility. Thank you, Thomas Dank, who says, when Rhaenys returned to scan the battlefield after wounding Vhagar at Rook's Rest, it bugged me. Why not just fly off? On a rewatch, though, I noticed her last words to Rhaenyra, I will meet Cole. Was that last pass to find him? Yeah, so in Season 2, Episode 4, we saw Rhaenys, like, swooping over the battlefield and, like, looking down on the battlefield before she was attacked and killed by Rhaenys. And yeah, I agree, that was a little confusing. Like, why was Rhaenys looking at the ground instead of, like, looking out for Vhagar, who was preparing to sneak critical for 4 times bonus damage against Meleys, crouching behind Rook's Rest? I agree that was confusing, and I agree that Rhaenys probably should have gotten the hell out of there, because it was pretty clear at that point that Meleys could not kill Vhagar. The actor Eve Best talked about it as like a suicide mission, like she wasn't expecting to survive. But yeah, I think running away might have been a pretty good move, honestly. Thank you, Smiling Knight, who says, the Ratcatcher's dog's hair is white. Is he a Targaryen? Yeah, maybe the dog is a Valyrian dog. Maybe it's an albino dog. Who knows? Shiny Pokemon dog. Thank you, Walrus behind you, who says, you should check out Westeros Craft. Yeah, as far as I'm aware, Westeros Craft is a project to build Westeros in Minecraft. And I've seen some images and stuff that look pretty cool. They're building some elaborate castles and keeps out there. So yeah, Westeros Craft sounds like a cool project. Thank you, Ada, who says, do you think Rhaenyra is acting more like her husband Daemon? Is this a reverse arc situation? I think the kiss made sense as Rhaenyra acts like Daemon taught. Yeah, maybe like Daemon is becoming a bit more sensitive like Rhaenyra, and maybe Rhaenyra is becoming a bit more violent and assertive like Daemon. Yeah, I mean, they said that they want to be each other. Maybe they will become more alike. That would be an interesting and ironic dynamic for their relationship, for sure. Thank you for the donation from Hendrix, who says that Sunfire got injured and left a smoke trail as he fell, and Meleys exploded when she crashed. It almost seems like they're trying to make them visually evoke warplanes, which I feel fits with the whole dragons are nukes theme. Yeah, dragons have been compared to nuclear weapons, and you know, nuclear apocalypse results when they go to war. So yeah, I think those are some cool comparisons. Thank you, Brandon, who says, poor George can't get a show that just follows his canon. Thanks for the content. Yeah, I mean, I think that overall, House of the Dragon is shockingly faithful to Fire and Blood. I think it's very close to the books. I think that it's a very strange book, and it's not an easy book to adapt. But yeah, I mean, if Rhaena claims a dragon in the Vale, that would be a big change from the books. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But I think that as adaptations go, Hot D is a very faithful adaptation so far. And George certainly wants faithful adaptations. He has said as much on his blog. Thank you, Hairless Oyster, who says, you sound dry. Take a sip and 2 absurdly large breaths. That's a great idea, Oyster. I will take a sip. Hairless Oyster with the good advice, as always. Valkyrie B says, I love Seasmoke claiming Adam. I think Adam being terrified and Seasmoke still being into it reinforces the idea that Targ knowledge on dragons and dragon bonds can be incomplete or incorrect. Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to get like a clear manual of this is exactly when dragons do and do not accept humans. I think it's always going to be a bit mysterious. And I think it's also going to come down to individual dragon personality. And I think in the case of Seasmoke might like Adam because Adam is related to Laenor. Thank you for the donation from Lil Coyotl, who says, I found it very terrifying and endearing how eager Seasmoke was to have a new rider. Yeah, Seasmoke was like an over-enthusiastic puppy dog chasing Adam. You know how like some dogs think that they're still little puppies? Like a big dog will like try and jump all over their owner because the dog doesn't even quite realize that it's enormous and heavy. It thinks it's still a puppy. I sort of got that energy from Seasmoke here. Thank you, GPN, who says that Aemond kicks Alicent off the council, but wants her daddy as his hand. I don't think he thought that all the way through. Yeah, I mean, I think that Aemond respects his grandpa Otto more than he respects his mother Alicent, and I think that it is partly like a sexist gender thing. I think that's part of what's going on there. Because, like, as Aemond said, like, he knows that Otto is a lot more conservative and hesitant and diplomatic than Aemond is, just like Alicent. So you would think, like politically, Alicent and Otto are very similar. The difference is that Alicent is his mum, whereas Otto is his grandpa, and I guess Aemond is willing to listen to Otto's advice, but not to Alicent's. So, sucks for Alicent. Thank you, Red Woman, who says, on the HBO website, Rhaena is younger than Baela. They are not twins, like in the books. I wonder if that is significant. Is that true? Does it actually say that she's... I mean, you can be twins and still be younger. Like, don't they say how, like, Jaime and Cersei, like, one of them is older than the other, even though they were birthed from the same womb, one of them came out first? Like, a twin can be older than another twin and still be twins. Thank you, Fouad Chowdhury, who says, any ideas as to why Daemon cries after learning that Grover is dead? I think that Daemon cries because he's still reeling from his dream about Viserys. I think that Daemon is crying about Viserys in that scene, but I think that it is really interesting how they sort of parallel Viserys with Grover. Daemon was very callous about Grover previously, telling Oscar to kill Grover. So maybe now that Daemon has sort of relived his grief of Viserys, maybe Daemon will now be more sympathetic to Oscar about the death of Grover. Thank you, Rational Orc, who says, the worst part of Aegon's condition is that he still needs Vhagar to win the war. Keep your enemies close. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Like, Aegon fears Aemond. Aegon worries that Aemond might kill him. But Aegon still needs Aemond because Aemond controls Vhagar, and Aegon can maybe no longer ride his dragon, Sunfire, and we've never seen Helena ride her dragon, Dreamfire, so Aemond has all the power here. No one can defy Aemond because he has the biggest dragon and they need him. So yeah, it's kind of an impossible position for Aegon. Thanks for the donation from Henning, who says, kinda disliked that the music got all gloomy and foreboding when Rhaenyra and Mysaria were making out. Like, God forbid a woman has hobbies. Yeah, no, I noticed that too. When Mysaria and Rhaenyra were kissing, the music got, like, really, like, ominous and discordant. And it's like, oh no, they're kissing. Like, the music made it sound like this is, like, a bad, dark thing, which... yeah, it surprises me. Like, is it bad that they are making out? Like, it's... why is that a bad thing? Why are these not two people who have good intentions and who are attracted to each other making out? Like, I mean, it's not even like they're having sex. It's not even like adultery or anything. It's just making out. I mean, it reminds me when Jon and Daenerys hooked up in Game of Thrones Season 7, and then Tyrion was watching on, and it was this creepy, awkward, ominous vibe that they were giving to that hookup. Like, it seems kind of similar here. Why is it a bad thing? I mean, like, yeah, like maybe... so Kristen Cole was calling Rhaenyra a whore, right? Aegon also was calling Rhaenyra a whore. And this is a propaganda war. And part of this propaganda war is that people are saying that, oh, Rhaenyra sleeps around. Rhaenyra had bastards. Rhaenyra is a quote-unquote whore. So maybe, like, the Greens could use Rhaenyra's potential relationship with Mysaria against Rhaenyra. It's like, oh, Rhaenyra's even hooking up with women, and like, oh, she's cheating on Daemon, so Rhaenyra is such an awful woman because she's sleeping around. I guess that is a way that this hookup could be used against Rhaenyra. And yeah, maybe like homophobia will be part of it. Maybe prejudice against Mysaria as a foreign woman might be used against them. There are ways that this could be an issue propaganda-wise, I suppose. But yeah, God forbid a woman has hobbies. Thank you, Manly Cookie, who says, if Alan is the bastard son of Corlys instead of Lenor, therefore not having dragon riding blood from Rhaenys, how can he bond with Seasmoke? Good question, Manly. As far as we know, Adam has no Targaryen blood, so how is it that he can ride a dragon? That is a good question. That is an open question. It is a mystery in the show and in the books. Thank you, Life of Pash, who says, why doesn't King's Landing just get supplies from the southern side of Westeros so that they don't have to rely on Blackwater Bay? Yeah, I mean, you would think that even with the Gullet blockaded, King's Landing should still be able to get food by land from the Stormlands, from the Fertile Reach, from elsewhere. But I mean, you know, there's a war going on, and the Reach needs their food, and the Stormlands needs their food, and the dragons need food, and, you know, supply lines are being interrupted. I can believe that, you know, like, no, as far, like, we haven't seen people starving in King's Landing yet. Like, they have less food. The situation's bad, but it's not like there's no food. There is some food coming in, so I can believe that they have less access, but it's not total starvation yet. They probably are getting some food from the Reach and elsewhere. Thanks for the donation from Shadowwalker, who says, thanks for your work. Loved binging your videos during GOT, and happy that I can watch you live now. Thank you, Shadowwalker. Glad you're enjoying. BJM says, I saw an itty bitty dragon. I can die happy. Yeah, it was lovely to finally see the dragon Stormcloud, who is the little baby hatchling dragon of Rhaenyra's son, Aegon the Younger. This is Stormcloud here. So we have now seen most of the dragons. Thank you, Jace. Thank you, Jess K, who says, Jace, I love you, Mummy Bible Thump. Thank you, Tears Library, who says, do you think Rhaena is going to... Alright, I'm not going to read any spoilers. But yeah, they do seem to be making some changes to Rhaena's storyline. No spoilers, no spoilers. Dave says, get yourself something nice, Pookie. I likey your V. Thank you, Dave Wiggler. Aurora says, I started laughing the moment Seasmoke turned to go after Adam, and the music starts as well. It is a fun comedic scene when Adam is running away from Seasmoke. Like, if it was a Targaryen, they'd be like, hell yeah, dragons, I'm gonna ride a dragon. But anyone who isn't a Targaryen would see a giant fire-breathing lizard and just, like, Xbox 360 and run the hell out of there, right? Like, that makes sense. Thank you, Matt Tuff, who says, I think the council ball is Aemon saying, I'm not just a counselor now, I am king, pal. Aegon losing face is like Jaime losing his hand. Now he has to be smart. Yeah, I think the one thing that Aegon had going for him was that he was a somewhat good-looking young man, and now that he's all burned, he no longer has that advantage. Thank you for the donation from Mason, who says, do you think the Blacks should instead be hosting a game show style competition to find dragon riders? I think it could definitely turn into a sort of an audience participation, fun activity for sure. Just a bit like Deal or No Deal, but with a lot more people burning alive. Thanks for the donation from Josh, who says, are there no guards or ships for the Greens guarding the shore? Seems a little ridiculous. Why not just send in more assassins and end this? I mean, I can believe that the Blacks control the seas because Corlys's fleet is blockading the Gullet, and they have this great fleet, and like I can believe that the Blacks basically have control of Blackwater Bay. But I do agree that there is an awful lot of like sneaking into King's Landing when it's like, surely someone could just assassinate the Greens. I mean, like Sylvie Sylvie seems to be wanting to help Rhaenyra. Is Sylvie still sleeping with Aemond? Surely Sylvie could, like, assassinate Aemond while he's in bed, right? It seems like assassinating the leaders might be doable, you know, like the death of Jaehaerys. Thank you, Tito, who says, immediately came here to hear your opinions. I think it's Livy Cook really cooked with this one. I could feel the weight and regrets when she said sorry to Aegon. Yeah. So much lovely, painful tragedy among the Greens. Thank you, Shadow Humor, who says, it's insane to me that this lineage has been mating with dragons for so long. Are you talking about the dragons mating with the dragons or the Targaryens mating with the dragons? We did see those murals of humans having sex with dragons. It is a messy, messy family tree, to be sure. Thank you, Clear Air Leica, who says, Alicent's not perfect, but I'm mad at people who are harsh to Alicent while not holding Rhaenyra or Daemon to the same standard. Just a thought. Yeah, I mean, every character has made catastrophic mistakes in this story. I think Alicent definitely made mistakes. But I mean, Alicent, you know, she was forced to marry Viserys. She was forced to bear those children while she was practically still a child herself. Alicent has suffered. And also, like, you know, Rhaenyra has made catastrophically bad mistakes, like having bastard children with Harwin Strong, you know? That was a pretty bad mistake. Also, faking the death of Laenor was a pretty wild choice. So, yeah. Thank you, Silver Hawkins, who says, I found Larys's play clumsy. I was also surprised he was even interested in the position of hand. He seemed content to stay out of the spotlight. I agree. I thought that it was funny that Larys, like, thought he was slick by saying that, oh, you need someone who's subtle to be your Hand of the King, so it should be me, haha. Like, I agree, that was not very slick. I think that Larys made the mistake of thinking that Aemond was as gullible as Aegon is. So, yeah, he was rebuffed. And, yeah, I agree. Like, I thought that Larys might be someone who might rule from the shadows, as opposed to in the spotlight. But, yeah, no, that was definitely a mistake by Larys. Okay, we are going to wrap up this live stream. It's been fun. Thank you so much for listening. Please like and subscribe. We are making weekly edited, scripted, explained videos, as well as these weekly live streams, so subscribe and look out for that. If you would like, you might like to sign up to Nebula at nebula.tv/AltSwiftX. Link in the description, because over there, my evil colleague, AltShiftX, has been doing even more House of the Dragon talk and Jon Snow talk with well-known ne'er-do-well Glidus. So you might be interested in checking out that. But yeah, thank you for your support. Sorry if I didn't get to read your donation or your super chat. I've done my best to read as many as I can. And otherwise, we'll see you next time, guys. Cheers.